Select Gaming Committee. Would you please call the roll?
Thank you. For the Select Committee on Gaming for July 30th, Senator Crago.
Here.
Senator McEwen.
Unexcused.
Representative Johnson.
Present.
Representative Webb.
Here.
Co-Chairman Kolb.
Present.
Co-Chairman Lean.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. As far as committee or remarks to get started with this committee this morning, we'll just make sure that we're timely and precise in our comments. While some of these topics do bleed together, please try and stay on topic for the one that we are currently addressing as we go ahead and get started today. Co-Chair Kolb, do you have any opening comments?
I do not, Co-Chair.
Thank you for joining us today. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our prior committee? Are there any objections to them?
Move to approve.
It has been moved that we approve the meeting minutes from our prior meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those have been adopted. We'll get started this morning with our Wyoming and other states gaming revenues. Ms. Schaefer. And welcome to everyone joining us virtually and in the room.
Good morning. Okay. Co-Chairman Lean, Co-Chairman Kolb, members of the committee. My name is Jessie Schaefer. I'm a research analyst with LSO, and I'm here today to provide a summary of a research memorandum prepared for the Select Committee regarding gaming amounts wagered and tax revenue compared by population or adjusted for population in other states. During the May meeting, I presented a short report to the committee to review gaming revenue distribution and taxation rates in other states. During that presentation, this memo was requested to review state gaming wagering amounts and figures in their revenue by comparing population, excuse me. In this memo, the types of gaming that we're reviewing will be the Wyoming legal types. So you have pari-mutuel wagering, online sports wagering, and skill-based amusement gaming. The states that were used to compare in this memo were included in the short report from the May presentation, just because it was very helpful for me to understand the tax makeup and what that distribution did. And those states and everything else is in Appendix A to this research memo. Before getting into the actual figures, I wanted to note some data limitations that I ran into when performing the calculations. The first of which, and these are included beginning on page 1 of the research memo. The first limitation is that the use of the per capita measure by itself may skew some comparisons here and there because it's an average and doesn't account for other factors. Some of those factors might be the residency of the wagerers themselves, individuals who do not take part in gaming, namely the under 18 population, geographical differences between the states that were compared, and then particularly with pari-mutuel wagering, the differences in the size of populations. The second data limitation to note is that for a couple different states, the time periods were a little bit different. So you might have a state that has fiscal year reporting where Wyoming has a calendar year reporting system. And then in the case of Nebraska, when we get to skill-based amusement gaming, they have less than a year's worth of revenue data because their taxation for skill-based amusement gaming is new. And then the final data limitation I wanted to note was that the surveyed states have different gaming structures. And so I couldn't account for states that have, different legalized gaming. And this comparison doesn't account for the total gaming activity in those states, just the specific types of gaming. So going to the good stuff, if we look to page 2 on pari-mutuel wagering, to begin with, just some population comparisons, Wyoming was compared to Kentucky and Virginia in the last paper, so we compared them here as well. Virginia has 8.8 million people, and Kentucky has 4.6 million. Wyoming is sitting at just above 500,000 at 588,000. Looking to figure 1, which begins on page 2 and goes into page 3, a couple things to note here. The table includes the total amount wagered, or the handle, for each of these states for the pari-mutuel events that took place in 2024, which was the last completed year of data. Then it looks into the total tax collected for those types of gaming and the tax rates for each event type. And something to note here is that the tax rates are relatively similar across all states, the percentages themselves. But then when we look to figure 2 on page 3, this is where that per capita measurement comes in. You can see because the populations are so different, having Virginia have almost 9 million people compared to Wyoming's little population. Some of the data looks as though Wyoming does collect a lot in total amount wagered and in tax revenue. But it's important to note that those tax rates themselves are fairly similar, so it's proportional. And because of this, I included on, let me see here, page 4, a visual representation of the total handles at large for each of the states. So you can see that Kentucky has by far the largest total amount wagered at around $10 billion. Figure 4 on page 4 was included to just provide another consideration for comparisons, looking at the number of racetracks in each state and the number of off-track facilities. You can see Wyoming has the most off-track facilities and Kentucky has the most racetracks. Before moving on to online sports wagering, any questions about pari-mutuel wagering?
Committee, any questions to this point? Co-Chair Kolb.
Thank you, Co-Chairman. Just a question, Jesse, did you do any comparison for the adjoining states and the amount of people that would say come into Wyoming for gaming purposes to get some idea, because of our small population? So it's kind of skewed. I understand it skews the numbers, but did you do any analysis of the adjoining states' participation in Wyoming betting? Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chairman, I did look into how that would work, but it doesn't appear that there is data collected when somebody places a wager to provide their residency. So I was unable to actually provide those figures, but I'll always look to my friends at the Gaming Commission if I misspoke there.
Thank you. Further questions? Ms. Schaefer, if you'll continue.
Okay, moving on to online sports wagering. This begins on page 5. For online sports wagering, Wyoming was compared to Maine with 1.4 million people and Vermont with 644,000 people. And both of these states are closest to Wyoming in terms of population throughout the research memorandum, so wanted to note that. Figure 5 follows the same structure as figure 1. It includes the 2025 adjusted taxable revenue. And for reference, the adjusted taxable revenue is going to be the total wagers minus any payouts to players or wagerers, and then minus that federal excise tax of 0.25%. So after all those things have been taken out, that is what these states tax. And you can see in the 2025 total tax collected that, especially for Wyoming and Maine, they are sitting right around 10% or exactly 10%. And then Vermont has that interesting way of doing things where they contract with 3 different operators through a competitive bidding process, and they have an average of 31.77%. Figures 6 and 7 on page 6 provide visual representations of that tax revenue per capita and at large. And for figure 6, the per capita shows that Vermont, as shown in the last table, collects the most taxes, but Maine has the largest amount of adjusted taxable revenue. And then that sums up online sports wagering, so I'm happy to take any questions there.
Committee, any questions on online sports wagering? I do have one for you. While you were talking about online sports wagering and the taxes that were paid, did you come across any amounts that were, excuse me, any amounts that we are putting towards problem gaming?
Madam Co-Chairman, in the short report that was provided at the May meeting, all 3 states are providing some amount to problem gaming or responsible gaming accounts. And I can point you to that. That begins on page 13 of Appendix A. Actually page 14 of Appendix A. So figure 13 on page 14 of Appendix A shows that 1% of gross receipts revenue distribution in Maine goes to the Gambling Addiction Prevention and Treatment Fund. And then in Vermont, I didn't include a table, but the Sports Wagering Enterprise Fund, there's a portion of that that goes to the Department of Mental Health's Responsible Gaming Programming.
Thank you. LSO, would you please mark Senator McEwen is here on the record? Thank you. If you'll please proceed, Ms. Schaefer.
Madam Co-Chairman, moving on to skill-based amusement gaming. This begins on page 7, and I'll apologize now for the amount of caveats I'm about to throw at you. The landscape of skill-based amusement gaming in other states varies widely. I ran into this when putting together Appendix A and chose Nebraska and Arkansas because their taxation statutes were the closest to Wyoming, but that doesn't necessarily pan out here. So for population, Arkansas's population is 3.1 million and Nebraska's is 2 million. If we go to page 8, on figure 8, it includes the taxable revenue, the total tax collected, and those statutory tax rates, but I owe you some explanation here. Arkansas has reported $0 in revenue since 2021. And even though their statutory tax rate is still on the books at that 20%, I looked into this, and the reason is because Arkansas recently reclassified skill-based amusement gaming to fall under electronic gaming devices. And this was because of a successful ballot initiative in 2018 to allow casino licensing in particular areas. And so all skill-based amusement gaming devices now fall under that casino gaming. And it wasn't possible for me to pull out those exact figures for who, partakes in skill-based amusement gaming.
Ms. Schaefer, Co-Chair Kolb.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Just a question back on the figure 13, page 14 to 23 about Maine. Is that, when you say percentage of adjusted gross receipts, how would that relate to total handle?
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So the total handle is going to be that the wagers all by themselves, that the total amount of wagers placed. The sports wagering gross receipts here is going to be those wagers minus payouts to players and then minus that federal excise tax. So that's what that's what Maine tax is on their gaming.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. We're trying to compare apples to apples here, right? So the big question is about the handle and about rates that applies to the total handle. So it would be helpful to know, I guess, how that would be interpreted as converted in a total handle instead of the way they're doing it. To give us, because the numbers look kind of skewed. I mean, we're talking about, what I mean? We're talking about 1%, we're not talking about 1% a handle. So I guess it would be helpful maybe if we had some information that would relate the two together to total handle as the state of Wyoming does it. Some sort of conversion if it could be done. And I don't know if that's easily done or not, but it'd be nice just to compare, like I said, apples to apples.
Mr. Co-Chairman, I can definitely pull the total amounts wagered for online sports wagering. If you look to, let me see here. Page 5 of the research memo presented today, the total adjusted taxable revenue in this table is all compared the same way. So each state has their total handle and then subtracts all those things, and that's what is taxed. But I could certainly pull the raw wager numbers. I would imagine they would be fairly proportional just because that 0.25 excise tax comes out of all of that. And then the payouts to players as well would most likely be proportional, but I could absolutely get you that information.
Further questions? When you're ready, Ms. Schaefer.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chairman. Okay. Okay, so headed back to page 8 of the research memo. So talking about why Arkansas has $0 reporting as being classified as casino. So those games are now taxed under the casino definition. And then Nebraska has a couple points of clarification as well. So if you look to their tax rates, you'll see that 5% of net operating revenue was effective last July, and they are actually changing that. They're increasing it to 10% as of July 18th of this year. So that is in effect now. However, because of that being new, I was able to grab 3/4 of the year's data for Nebraska. So keeping that caveat in mind, that this is the state that doesn't have the full year data. And then the other thing to note, unlike online sports wagering that does kind of define what they tax all the same, Nebraska and Wyoming do these things differently. So Wyoming taxes the net proceeds, which is going to be the net operating revenue, the total amount of revenue that's pulled in, and pulls out payouts to players. Whereas Nebraska they tax their total revenue, their operating revenue. So they have not pulled out payments to players, and they tax the full amount. Because of this, the caveats, figure 9 also needs some explanation. So because it's not a full year of data, Nebraska's taxable revenue is larger than Wyoming's, but it would be larger if we had a full year data to work with. And then you can see Wyoming's tax collected is that 10%, is that 20%, and does look larger than Nebraska's. But as of this time next year, we'll have data that shows that they are collecting 10% of their net operating revenue. I included figures 10 and 11 on page 9 just to compare those things to provide more of an apples to apples comparison. In figure 10, you'll see what we just saw in the table and the per capita measure, that Nebraska's total taxable revenue is way more than Wyoming's. But if you take Wyoming's net operating revenue and compare it to Nebraska's, we have about 20 million. We've collected about 20 million more in total operating revenue. And those exact figures are going to be in the paragraph immediately preceding that, coming from the Wyoming Gaming Commission's 2025 annual report. And with that about sums up the research memo. I'm happy to take any questions about skill-based amusement gaming or any questions at all.
Committee, any questions on skills-based amusement or the rest of the memo? I do have one question for you. When you're looking at the casino games, are these also taking into account the sweepstakes, the social casinos? When you were talking about Arkansas moving theirs under a digital gaming initiative?
Madam Co-Chairman, I would have to look and see if Arkansas participates in the online sports wagering portion or iGaming, not online sports wagering, iGaming as a state. If so, then it would be possible that they would include that in their casino taxation, but it would also be possible that they do not have iGaming. They just have these electronic gaming devices, slot machines, electronic roulette at the physical plant at the casino.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your research, Ms. Schaefer. Is there any public comment on this research or any added comments that someone would like us to know? We'll go ahead and move into draft or 27 LSO 0096, draft problem gaming prevention and treatment funding legislation. Good morning, Ms. Tamara.
Good morning, members of the committee. Madam Chair, I'm Tamara Reveley. I'm legislative staff with this committee and with the Legislative Service Office. I'm here to explain proposed House Bill Working Draft 27 LSO 0096. You should have Working Draft 0.4 in front of you. It's called Responsible Gaming and Problem Gambling Prevention Funding. So this bill draft came about after discussion at last month's, or actually May's meeting, the committee's last meeting in May, where one of the agenda topics was to discuss a House bill that was introduced. It was by Representative Johnson, House Bill 171. The committee looked at that House bill and considered options and directed LSO to draft a bill that would more comprehensively create a pooled funding model for problem gaming and responsible gambling and make that centralized. Recall that right now, funding allocations for this type of activity, though it's not called problem gaming and problem gambling as it is here, responsible gaming, come in two forms. There's one for sports wagering. There's $300,000 for sports wagering that is directed to the Department of Health and then used to fund county activities. And then there's one in the lotto statutes. And the committee directed that all types of gaming now contribute to some kind of a pooled fund and that it apply uniformly against all types of gaming. So this bill draft affects gaming and it affects that sports wagering. It doesn't go into the lotto and affect that, but that probably could be looped in within the title if that was the intent. So it creates a dedicated account and it funds that account from all types of gaming. It takes the revenue that would otherwise go to the state or the Gaming Commission. It does not create a new tax or a new carve out. So it takes money that would otherwise go to the state or the Gaming Commission and it dedicates it to that account and then specifies what the funds from that account can be used for. And they can be used through contracts or directly. And it would be administered by the Wyoming Gaming Commission. So right now, the Wyoming Department of Health is involved. The Wyoming Department of Health would no longer be involved into this draft, at least with respect to the funding. Rather, the Gaming Commission would be, and they would be authorized to contract as necessary or to take on activities directly. So with that, I will just jump into the bill draft. Page 1, the act relates to gaming. It creates the responsible gaming and problem gambling account. It authorizes uses of funds. It provides for transfers to the account. It modifies existing state gaming revenues and distributions. It creates new duties for the Gaming Commission, and it requires reporting. This would create a new article within the Gaming Commission statutes. It's 1125-401, Article 4. It would be responsible gaming and problem gambling prevention. On page 2, you see that new statute and new account being created. It'd be a new account administered by the commission. It would consist of all funds that are transferred to the account or any kind of gifts, grants, bequests, transfers. All funds within the account would be invested by the state treasurer and the account would retain its investment earnings. That's a policy decision of whether the account's investment earnings should go to the general fund or should be retained. This bill draft has them retained. The money in the account would be continuously appropriated to the commission to be expended as provided in the section. And then the money in the account would not lapse or revert. It would remain in the account and be available for expenditure as provided in the section. This wouldn't prohibit the legislature from appropriating from the account in future years, but if left alone, the account would just be set up to collect funds from gaming revenues and to be allowed to be used by the Gaming Commission. I imagine that the legislature would still see it in the budget coming through between the report that's required in this bill and the general budgeting process where accounts like these are reported, but it's sort of set on autopilot here with the continuous appropriation and the continuous transfers or earmarks that we're going to jump into next. So page 3. We have that each fiscal year, the commission shall transfer to the responsible gaming and problem account. Now, this is where the committee can make a policy decision. At the last meeting, the committee just wanted to leave it open for discussion as to whether it would be a specific amount or a specific percentage or how to apply that uniformly across all gaming, which was the sort of desired statement or direction that was provided at that meeting. For existing sports wagering, remember that's just the first 300,000 that comes in. This could also be an amount equal to some percent of this distribution that we're affecting. And on the last page of this bill, I have a staff comment that kind of gives you some numbers that could be used to estimate about how much set aside you would be creating based on a percentage. But keep in mind that it can be worded as a percentage of this distribution. We're talking about the state distribution. We're not talking about total wager or total handle or gross receipts. It could also be directed as amount of gross receipts or whatever on the top number each specific type of gaming gets. Right now, it's just drafted to apply to the state's distribution. So then on the rest of page 3, we point to each of the types of gaming that are regulated in Wyoming. First is online sports wagering, then historic parimutuel events, and live parimutuel events, and source market fees. And finally, on page 4, skill-based amusement games. These each point to the next statutes that we're going to go in and amend in the next section. And this just allows for one uniform percentage to be put forth in this bill. So if that's the intent to make it uniform, you can change it here in one place and it'll apply to all of these different revenue streams. I did note here in the staff comment on page 4 that Lotto was not directed to be addressed by this bill draft, and it does currently have a carve out of $200,000 annually of unclaimed prize money for consultation with the Department of Health programs for the treatment of compulsive gambling disorder and educational programs related to the disorder. This would not change that unless the committee or legislators wanted to bring those statutes in and bring them, loop them into this bill. Then.
May we interrupt?
Sure.
Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair. Just a question about the lottery, sweeping it. We could change the bill title to include that if we so desired. It's possible.
Yes, at this point, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, it is possible to change the title. In the draft stage, we have no constitutional restrictions on rewriting the title. Now, the challenge would be to create it all under one nexus. And so right now, the nexus is gaming. I think if we brought in Lotto, the nexus might be responsible gaming and gambling funding. Because rather than being the subject of being gaming and taking a piece of gaming revenue, the subject is now create a funding mechanism for problem gaming and problem gambling.
Thank you.
Further questions? Please proceed.
So on the bottom of page 4, subsection C provides that funds in the gaming, responsible gaming and gambling, problem gambling account shall be expended only for programs and services activities related to responsible gaming and the prevention, identification, and recovery support services for problem gambling, including, and then we list out 6 types of expenses. This just comes from the prior interim and this year's meetings of hearing the types of efforts that are already being undertaken in Wyoming or that are being undertaken by the operators. It's not existing anywhere else in statute, so there's probably room for improving it or better articulating it, but just trying to articulate and capture all of the efforts that we've heard about. The first is public education, awareness, and outreach. The second is prevention, treatment, referral, and recovery support services. The third is training and technical assistance for the licensee, the permittees, and the service providers and other persons, training on responsible gaming practices and identification of prevention, referral, and treatment or problem gambling. The fourth is research, data collection, evaluation, and reporting. The fifth is the development, operation, and support of helplines, self-exclusion programs, and other player protection resources. And then the sixth is the administrative expenses. So this would not require use of all of these expenditures, but these are the expenditures that funds in the account could be expended on, absent change by the legislature or future appropriation. The commission would be able to expend the funds under subsection D directly, by contract, or by distributing them to counties or other governmental entities. But those either done through contract or directly would still have to be limited to the program services or activities that I just articulated. Then E is the reporting mechanism, and the commission would be required to require each entity that carries out, that is contracted with or carries out the programs or services reporting sufficient to demonstrate the authorized use of the funds. And that report would be due October 1st of each year to the Joint Appropriations Committee on the status of the account and the expenditures and services and activities. I just selected the Joint Appropriations Committee because they do currently get accounts of this type. Right now, this committee, of course, is created by the Management Council. It is not a statutory committee that is known that it will continue in existence. It may do so, but right now, with it being subject to the Management Council's recreation each year, I sent the report to the Joint Appropriations Committee. So that's the new law that would govern this account and the use of the funds. Section 2 is amending the existing law to conform it and to point back to the new law. The first is sports wagering statutes. That's on the bottom of page 6 and the top of page 7. This is 924-104. There's existing language to strike there on page 7, lines 3 through 8. This is the existing first $300,000 that's continuously appropriated to the Department of Health that would be distributed to counties, or that currently is distributed to counties for the purposes of funding county health programs and to prevent and treat problem gambling behavior. Instead, we strike that language and insert that the amounts would be remitted to the commission, transferred to that responsible gaming and problem gambling account. It doesn't say the amount because the amount is back in that statute, the 1125-401. So it's just there in that one place. The next statute to amend is the parimutuel statutes, 1125-201. On page 8, there's a conforming amendment on the top, clarify accounts, and then subsection D is the actual distribution that we're going into.
May we interrupt one more time? Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair. Just a question about the Appropriations Committee. Could there be possible language in there that would allow the Appropriations Committee to approve said expenditures, kind of like we do with Game and Fish or Parks and Rec or whatever it might be? It has to be approved by the Appropriations Committee for an authorized expenditure. Can that language be considered?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman. There could be language that would require that the account be subject to appropriation so that it go through the normal budget process, that the money be set aside, but that nothing be expended until the legislature through the Joint Appropriations Committee's introduced bill and then the legislature's final approved bill, that they're appropriating the exact amount and total sum to be expended. But to actually approve each individual expenditure or each individual contract, there are some complications to think of. And one of that is separation of powers, where
Just to follow up with that, if I could, I didn't intend for that. Just to approve the blanket appropriation for the year, and then they would delegate said contracts once the appropriation was approved. That was really the question, if I could help with that. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, I think we would just go back in and change that continuously appropriated language and make it subject to legislative appropriation. And then that way, through the biennial budget, the legislature would know exactly how much could be used on this program. And if the account was getting too full, the legislature could always sweep it into another account at that time and have more control over it than a continuous appropriation that's just reported on.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Tamara, on page 7, the red language, am I reading this correctly? And I don't know if it's the intent or not, but it says amounts remitted to the commission under this subsection shall be transferred to the responsible gaming and problem gaming account. So that would be all of the 10% coming from sports gambling, sports wagering. And then if that's the case, we wouldn't need the remainder of the paragraph where it says the remainder of monies remitted shall be deposited into the general fund.
Right.
Ms. Tamara?
Thank you. So this was directed to be the amounts remitted to the commission under this subsection, the 10%, as required by 1125-401. And this could probably use a bit of improving, where the amount of the distribution was not known, whether it's going to be a percentage or an actual dollar figure, and it's kind of up to the committee to decide. What this is trying to point to is whatever's required, 1125-401, that amount goes to the account, and then the remainder would be deposited by the state treasurer into the general fund. So it was not intended to capture all 10%, but we might be able to finesse that language a bit when the committee decides how they want to set that percentage or create that total carve out.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm grappling with the fact that we're moving this from the Department of Health to gaming, and I kind of need to understand why. Is the Department of Health not doing a good job with it?
I might opine real quick. Good Senator, we're not quite there, and that was the directive I gave in the last committee, but I will refer to Ms. Tamra.
Yes, Madam Chair, that was just the direction from the last committee that it be centralized. And I think that there was discussion that you heard from the Department of Health and from the Gaming Commission about discussion of how they would operate if they were to be the centralized entity. And I think they can provide you advice on how they would do so. The bill draft attempts to allow flexibility in not requiring that whoever is the centralized running entity be the expert, that they can contract for those services. They don't necessarily have to do them all in-house, but it's flexible right now, and it could easily be revised to be the Department of Health or another entity wholly created or anything else. It would just, we would have some changes in where it's located at in the green book.
Follow up? No. Further questions? Please proceed.
See, we were just jumping into the parimutuel revenue distribution on page 8. And again, this language goes into the carve out or the revenue that currently flows to the parimutuel account there in subsection D, and directs that first we would take off the responsible gaming and problem gaming account amount that would be described in the first part of this bill, whatever that amount is going to be or percentage. Otherwise, this money would go to the parimutuel account, and anything above $1.5 million goes to the legislative stabilization reserve account. So because of the level of revenues in recent years and the total handle that is taken at the top, that money has spilled over. There has been more than 1.5. So this is where the majority, if we're talking about a percentage, this is where a majority of the funds are going to come from because it is the biggest type of gaming, of course, in Wyoming, the largest number. So what this bill draft does in effect is it takes money from the legislative stabilization reserve account, but we can talk about that a little bit more at the end if figures stay where they are. Of course, you know, things could change and gaming levels could be much different or much lower. And if so, if gaming levels were not sufficient enough to have that tip, we would see the commission's administrative expenses diminished because of this carve out here. So the next section is section M on page 9. This is the out-of-state simulcasting source market fee. It just conforms that to point to the carve out for the new account. Then the final section is on page 10, 1125-304, skill-based amusement games. And this would go into that 10% that goes to the Gaming Commission account and take that amount and transfer it, whatever that amount ends up being, and transfer it to the new account. This money is coming directly from the Gaming Commission account, which is used for administrative expenses of the skills-based amusement games. So my final staff comment just attempts to show the state statutory distributions that are affected by the bill draft and estimates what amount would be transferred to the responsible gaming and problem account based on the 2025 figures. Again, this bill draft doesn't create a new tax or a fee based on direction from the committee, but rather it just directs a percentage of the existing state revenue. And in some cases, that's the commission's existing revenue. So you see on that chart, online sports wagering, the statutory distribution that's affected is currently the first $300,000 to this sort of same purpose, and then the remainder to the general fund. The reported distribution that went to the state was 1.8 million in 2025. So 15% would be about $100,000. You'd be a little less than that 300,000 that's currently going. 20% would be 571, and 25% would be 463,214. For live horse racing, this is currently going to the pari-mutuel account, and then the excess over 1.5 million goes to the LSRA, the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account. So based on the reported distribution for live horse racing, you see those numbers for 15, 20, and 25%. For simulcasting, same thing. It's the pari-mutuel account, the excess to the LISRA, and then historic horse racing is the large figure where same thing, pari-mutuel account, access to LISRA, but you can see that 15%, 20%, and 25% of the historic horse racing amount of tax that currently is distributed to the state. Those amount to the largest figures here, be 900,000, 1.2 million, or 1.5 million, just based on these estimates. And finally, skill-based amusement games is currently the distribution we're affecting in this bill. Currently all goes to the Gaming Commission account. And you can see that 15, 20, and 25% would be around 100,000, 150,000, the high end. So those are some example totals, just summing up those figures for your thoughts. If you're still considering going in the direction of a percentage, if you'd rather go for dollar figures, or another option is that rather than touch all parts of gaming and touch each type of gambling, you could just go after where the largest amount of money is to simplify the bill draft if you didn't want to have every single type of gaming amended and touched in this draft and wanted something more simple. And again, you don't have to create an account, and you don't have to have continuous appropriations. These are all just matters of policy, and we could direct revenue in a more simplistic way, or keep it as is. These are just kind of open for policy discussion and what your direction would like to be.
Thank you for the presentation of the bill draft. Are there any questions as a whole? I do have one on page 5. We're talking about lines 11 and 12, where it talks about research, data collection, evaluation, and reporting. Last interim, we heard about a Laramie County data survey that was done as far as problem gaming and what's going on in Laramie County. Would that be reimbursable via this bill draft in this problem gaming account?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I think as long as the expenditure relates to the prevention, identification, and recovery support services for problem gambling, it could include contracting or directly doing research, data collection, evaluation, reporting.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Representative Webb.
I don't know if this question will be for Tamara or for the director, but on page 11, we talk about there's no new tax or fee on the operators. And I don't recall what our discussion was in our previous meeting, but my concern is this: the operators are benefiting, the local governments benefit, and the state's paying. It seems to me that the operators and the local governments should have some skin in the game. Do you recall any conversation about that last trip or at our last meeting?
Ms. Cameron.
Thank you. I do recall the direction being not to create a new tax, to take it from existing state revenue, but that is completely a matter of policy. The bill could easily go into other distributions. They would just be different, mostly the same statutes, but just different paragraphs, and could evenly spread it out, or spread it out by some percentage, or create an entirely new cut off the top from the operator's source of revenue.
Follow up?
No follow-up for Tamara, no, but I think that's something we need to discuss later on. Thank you.
Further questions? I have one for you. In this bill draft, I don't see that it says directly to increase the personnel at the Wyoming Gaming Commission or otherwise to be able to maintain this account and give directives. I don't read it as restrictive. Could you just speak to the bill draft as a whole and an individual that could potentially be hired or not hired and is just a new duty put on the Gaming Commission?
That's right. This bill draft does not create authority for additional personnel within the Wyoming Gaming Commission. It does create authority to contract and to use the funds for administrative expenses of administering this account and carrying out the activities that are allowed. I think that if the committee envisions having permanent full-time staff, it would be best to have an amendment at the end and a non-codified section directing how many employees and the salary, just because that is how the legislature budgets for employees, is to authorize full-time employee positions. They may be able to, under existing statute, implement this act through an at-will employee contract position. But then, of course, that would come back to the legislature in the next budget cycle to either approve or not approve. We could also specify, just so there was no doubt in anyone's mind, that they could indeed hire at-will employee contractors to set this up or to get it running. We can have that direction in a non-codified section right now. It's just open to interpretation that the funding can be used for administrative expenses and it can be expended directly or through contract.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Thank you, Ms. Verley. Director Laramendi. Good morning. Welcome to Select Gaming. It's good to see you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Good morning. Nice to see you all. My name is Nick Laramendi. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. And if you would like, I can jump right into this.
Please do.
So if you'll recall, we had talked, I believe at the last committee meeting, about centralizing these funds, trying to make it a little more statewide initiative. I think, you know, from our perspective, from the Gaming Commission's perspective, when we first started looking at that, it was if the Gaming Commission had kind of oversight of that, we could contract with some public health expertise to offer some sort of free counseling. We already do that in the state of Wyoming through an initiative or through an agreement with a company called KindBridge, which is telehealth services that's actually currently funded by some online sports wagering folks currently. When we review this bill as it's drafted now, I will tell you that we don't have any concerns about funding this bill from all areas of gaming that we oversee. However, we do have some real concerns with housing this type of program within the Gaming Commission. And the reason is we don't have the expertise to do a lot of this. I think if starting on page 5, if you look at public education, awareness and outreach, we can certainly do that. Like we have folks on our staff that is what their kind of role is in responsible gaming right now, is public education, awareness and outreach. But that's where it ends. When you start looking at prevention, treatment and referral, you're starting to take on clinical roles. And we don't have anybody on our staff that has any sort of clinical experience. Problem gaming it's considered a mental health issue. I think they have it listed in the, what do they call it? The DSM-5 as a mental health disorder. So because of that, clinical expertise matters. A lot of times problem gaming is partnered or paired with other sorts of mental health conditions or substance abuse. So there's problem gaming, and then there's also maybe alcohol abuse or drug abuse, depression or things like that, which we certainly don't have any sort of experience in dealing with underlying mental health concerns in addition to the problem gaming. So usually when you look at things like this, these type of programs are run by health departments. You know, whether it be the Department of Health or some other agency that focuses on health. And the reason I think a lot of that is because, so currently right now, the Department of Health does have behavioral health specialists. They have substance and use specialists. They have public health experts. They have healthcare providers. Because we lack that, we would rely heavily on contracting with other agencies to do that. And I fear that that would dilute the value of the program. We would end up spending so much in contracting with other entities to administer this program that the money left over to actually provide these services that we're trying to provide would be less because of that. One of the other things that I had pointed out, or that I have in my notes here, is evidence-based prevention. Public health agencies routinely conduct surveillance, education, screening, and prevention initiatives across the board. They are experienced in reducing health risks before they become crisis, rather than focusing primarily on regulatory compliance. This is kind of a unique bill draft because it does put problem gaming under a regulatory body. So as a regulatory body, we're ensuring that, the public is gambling on legal forms of gambling. And then we also have a branch in our office that is trying to reduce gambling. It creates kind of a weird dynamic of kind of a conflict there. So again, like I said, we certainly don't have any issues with funding this across the board. We actually believe that all areas of gaming should be funding problem gambling. It's just, where is the right home for this? Is the right home for this really the Gaming Commission, or does it belong with the Department of Health? And I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Senator McEwen.
More of a comment. So if we move this to the Gaming Commission, and as I heard, we're probably going to have to add some people to it, right? Would we take those people out of the Department of Health? Or are we just growing government?
Director, any thoughts on the question?
Madam Chair, Senator McEwen, I don't think we would take them from public health. I mean, we would have to get the appropriation to increase our staff, and then we would have to try to acquire, clinical-based, really medical staff that have an understanding of problem gaming that could run a program of this magnitude.
Follow up?
But it already exists in the Department of Health, doesn't it?
Director?
Madam Chair, Senator, so they do have, they have behavioral health expertise in the Department of Health already. Yes. Do they have one specific to problem gaming? I can't answer that question, but I know that they have a division for mental health.
Further questions? Co-Chair Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, Mr. Laramundi, so I guess what I heard you say is that adding another layer of bureaucracy for the administration of this account probably isn't the best idea for keeping it efficient. Is that fair analysis of what you said?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, yes, I believe so. Like I said, I worry that we would have to do so much contract work because we lack the expertise and experience in this realm that it would dilute the value of the program, and it wouldn't accomplish what we're really trying to accomplish.
Follow up?
Yeah, then another follow-up on another topic, sweeping all monies in, lottery money, all monies in for problem gaming. You feel that's a good idea or a bad idea?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I think that's a good idea.
Representative Webb.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My question for the director is, and I appreciate his comment on problem gambling is a mental health disorder. I've picked up some information the other day and would like to ask you if it is true or not that in Uinta County, they're looking at opening another large casino in addition to the one that just opened.
Director?
Madam Chair, Representative Webb. So another operator was approved for another, what we're calling border sites. It's kind of across the highway from that one. That one was approved, and I believe they'll start construction on that at some time, but it was approved, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Further questions? Director, I do have one for you. When we're also looking at a professional gaming commission later in the day, what are your thoughts about a professional gaming commission having an individual that is also a behavioral health specialist to help oversee this as a part of that board?
Madam Chair, I think when you get to that bill, I mean, I think that would definitely help if you had a professional board and one of those members had the clinical experience to oversee this type of a program. I think that would be a step in the right direction. I still, the one caution that I would give though is we're still kind of mixing a regulatory agency with a prevention agency, and that does kind of create a weird dynamic.
Further questions? Representative Webb.
Thank you. And sorry, this is kind of more of a follow-up on what I asked before. In Uena County, we normally had two, and I'm going to call them casinos because to me they are a casino. With this expansion of the one that's now been approved, are we going to have four? Do they have to shut down their previous ones?
This applicable to this bill.
Director,
Madam Chair, Representative Webb. So currently, they're not required to shut those other ones down. They will be looking at their numbers to see if it's feasible to keep those open. I will tell you that as we've seen some of these newer, larger sites come online, these operators have made the business choice to shut numerous locations down across the state. I think we've actually had 5 or 6 closed within about the last 8 months.
thank you for your questions on this. I might just add that in about a half hour, we've got a break scheduled, and I would ask that we follow up with the appropriate operator to see if they might be interested in consolidating at that time. Senator Kolb.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. Now back on the bill. And so the question would be on page 3, where the blanks are up there for the gambling account, X amount of dollars. Any thoughts about on that, on those numbers, Director?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I didn't put a lot of thought into the amount of dollars. You know, I mean, there's definitely funds available. And I think if you look through this bill draft, some of the, I think at the very bottom, the attachment for the estimated transfers, if I read this correctly, if it was 15%, that would fund this account about $1.3 million a year, which is a pretty substantial increase from the current 300,000. And then if you were to add the lottery money into that as well, I think that's 200,000. So you're looking at $1.5 million a year at the 15%, which is pretty substantial. I think you could actually probably reduce that to maybe like 5 to 7% and still have a program that has a pretty substantial, definitely better than what we're at right now.
Director, I do have a question about how often your office is currently communicating with the Department of Health for the monies that are allocated. Could you kind of speak to that?
Madam Chair, so I know Sarah Beth, she's our public or responsible gaming liaison. She does, I think they're monthly meetings. Yes. So she does monthly meetings with the Department of Health and then the Wyoming Council on Problem Gambling. They have pretty standing meetings every month that they meet and they talk about issues and things, initiatives that are going on.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you, Director. At this time, we'll open it up to public comment. All those wishing to comment publicly, please come forward and fill the seats.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
we don't have any direct questions. They are available should you have questions.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome. Oh, and is there online commentary for this section?
Well, we should take public Department of Health comment first.
My apologies. We do have Cheyenne Regional as well as the Wyoming Lottery. I'll go ahead and bring them in as well.
Thank you. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself to the committee and tell us what you'd like us to hear.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, Lindsay Semino with the Wyoming Behavioral Health. We would love to thank the committee for bringing this bill forward. We were very excited to see it when it was proposed this last legislative session, and we were excited to work with Representative Johnson in regards to this bill. We do want to echo some of the sentiments that we've heard this morning and some that have been echoed throughout the interim, that this program is more than likely best served within the Department of Health. The Department of Health does have community prevention specialists for each county. There is one for each county. I did confirm that with the Department of Health this morning. And they are working with Wyoming's county commissioners to make sure that each county's needs are met and that those unique needs are being addressed on the ground level. With us, as you've heard this morning, having this program within the Gaming Commission, they will be at risk of having to duplicate those efforts and that infrastructure to implement a program like this. And it does feel as though it falls nicely underneath Department of Health and the Public Health Division. And with that, that's really our greatest ask this morning. And with that, I stand for any and all related questions.
Thank you, Ms. Semino. Senator McEwen.
So if this got moved to the Department of Health, would there be any increase in personnel, or can you handle it with what you have right now?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator McEwen, my understanding is that there would not be. My understanding is that the reasoning that the funding has not been taken advantage of in the past is because of its low funding structure. That, as we talked about at the last meeting, for some counties, it's not even enough to put up a billboard. And so that was the reasoning behind the lack of engagement when it came to our community prevention specialists. And so having this underneath the Department of Health, it wouldn't actually add work. It would just be a continuation of what they're already doing on the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Co-Chair Kolb does have a question for the Department of Health, if we could bring them in.
Good morning. I'm Angie Van Houten with the Wyoming Department of Health, and available for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I had a question generally about an addiction specialist as it applies to gambling addiction specialist. Do you have anybody on staff now that has those qualifications that are, I assume it's going to be unique to the other type of services you offer? Could you kind of explain what you do have or what you might need if you were required to have a person of that qualification on staff?
So the Behavioral Health Division, I'm with the Public Health Division, but the Behavioral Health Division works with community health centers across the state. And really those are the entities that provide the addiction services at the local level. So, you know, they've stated that, you know, addiction services and treatment for those do follow along the same lines. And so obviously the Behavioral Health Division does work with those community health centers, mental health centers across the state. So hopefully that makes sense. And then obviously there's also clinically trained mental health providers within the Department of Health through the Behavioral Health Division. I don't know their specific qualifications, but again, are trained in addiction services.
Follow up?
Yeah, just so be more pointed about the question. It's about a person, a point of contact person that's a behavioral health specialist with gaming addictions. I realize what we're doing now at the Department of Health has folks that do a lot of different things because I know they're co-related, but in particular, we're talking about gaming addictions. So to have a single point of contact, that would be that person. And then they would obviously probably communicate with the other counties or as they feel they need to. But the question is what do we have there right now? If we don't, that's fine. I just wondered about specifying a behavioral health specialist in gambling, not some broad, you know, person that does many different type of behavioral issues, but one that deals with that. Or maybe you could explain to that question why we wouldn't need a person like that because you're already trained in that arena. If you could answer that or not, I'd appreciate Thank you.
I can get that answer, but I don't feel like I know if we have a specifically trained clinical representative at the Department of Health right now, but I can certainly find that out and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd be willing to send that over to our LSO staff and get it to the committee, that would be a great help to us. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have a question about addictions. We're specifically asking about gambling addictions. Don't addictions foster in one center part of the brain? And I've heard of people that they'll trade one addiction for another. So if we're just going to focus on gambling addictions, maybe we get them to stop gambling, but they trade that for another addiction. Shouldn't this program include all addictions? And I think that if we just narrow it down to only gambling, we're not doing the best. We're not getting the best bang for our buck for the state.
Representative Johnson, chairs, thank you. So the community mental health centers across the state they have services for providing, treatment for multiple addictions. And so I can verify this, but, when they're working with clients, I'm sure that they are working with them on, addiction in general and prevention and treatment of that. But I can verify that for sure with the Behavioral Health Division and how treatment services are provided through the mental health centers.
Follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along with this addiction, I would like to see some sort of financial planning help or budgeting as part of that. I think when we talk about gaming, the first thing that's going to show in a relationship is the finances are going to drop out of the family unit, and people, you probably don't know your spouse might have a gambling addiction problem until the mortgage is not paid. So I would like to somehow include financial planning or some sort of counseling for that. I have any questions? Thank you.
Do you have any remarks for that, Miss Angie?
I feel like that makes sense what you're referencing, and certainly you'll take note of that.
Thank you. Further questions for the Department of Health? Thank you for your comments, and thank you for being online and available for us. Councilman Sweeney.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to come and offer, I am able to answer any mental health or clinical questions when it comes to addictions, as well as how the community mental health centers work and address this issue, and am open to take those questions as well.
Questions? Representative Johnson.
Well, let's go to the addiction center of the brain. Do people just trade one addiction for another? So, and I'm saying that if we just focus this on gambling addictions, we're not probably doing the best with our money. So if we could address that, thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Johnson, what you are stating when it comes to the nature of addiction in the brain is absolutely correct. What we do see in a variety of addiction treatment is when somebody is in recovery, we're going to use alcohol, for example, they are highly likely to then begin to substitute with sugar is what they're most common for. When we study bariatric patients, we have bariatric patients do a psych eval. The reason for this is because many of them are addicted to food. Once food is not an option, their greatest switch is alcohol. They will actually switch to become addicted to alcohol over time if it's not addressed correctly. And so there is a lot of underlying mental health issues when it comes to any addictive pattern. It is unique to that individual person. And I think that concern is warranted.
Thank you. Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It just, we're trying to focus on the gaming industry and gaming addictions, okay? I'm not trying to solve all the social problems of the world. Obviously, there's many of them and people have many addictions. I could offer I have the evidence that says I knew people that were addicted to gambling. I never would have realized they were, but I found out they were because they started interacting in a way that they couldn't quit. But they weren't addicted to anything else. I think everything's probably pretty unique, but in so much as we're using gaming money, I think the focus is on dealing with gaming addictions, to be clear. We're not here. I mean, my purpose is not to solve the social addictions of the world. We're trying to use gaming money to deal with gaming, right? If it helps other people, I think that's great. But in so much as your testimony, the focus is on dealing with problem gaming, right? And that's it. So the best use of this money, I mean, your opinion now that we have this Heinz 57 process where we spread a little bit of money everywhere and hoping it does some good. So the purpose of this bill was to, in fact, congregate it in one area and focus it and do the best we can with that money to try to make an impact, because in my opinion, we haven't made an impact on what we're trying to do. So do you think focusing the money into one pool and then dispersing it, you know, for in this arena, addictive gaming is a good thing or a bad thing? Or do you think it's better spent in a very wide way, that just like we're doing now with the Department of Health Addiction Specialists? So that's the broad question. Is it better to have a bill like this, or throw the money in the Department of Health, let's say, to deal with things as they currently deal with? And, you know, we hope for the best. So I guess I'd like to hear your opinion.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Kolb, we absolutely support the bill as is. We want to be able to give clinical context and evidence-based information whenever we can, if that helps the committee form their decisions, for sure. However, when it comes to this specific bill, we are grateful that this is becoming a focal point. We are grateful whenever the legislature decides that there is a public health issue that needs addressed. As far as the problematic gaming, we are seeing that as a trend, which is, I think, why we have decided to focus on it today. And though there are going to be other mental health issues connected to this, that doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Being able to address this issue, if that is what brings people into the door to begin to address the other issues within their own personal life or their own trauma history, then we can also address those other issues. As we've seen with the DSM-5, which was mentioned earlier, and the revisions of the DSM-5, gaming addiction is not just part of that, but they're also redefining it and bringing those trainings to the forefront. So as far as wanting to focus just on gaming addiction, that specialty is absolutely on the rise and is something that I think Wyoming can definitely benefit from, just the gaming addiction point of view. Did I answer that?
Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
I would kind of like to counter that argument. If we focus only on gambling addictions, wouldn't it be easier to just say, well, don't do this gambling, why don't you just drink more alcohol? Are we just forcing them or allowing them to go to another addiction? That's my point. I think it would be simple to just trade another addiction for gaming or alcohol or pornography or whatever it is. I think that this is a total mental health issue. And I would hate to see it restricted only to gaming with the ability to just trade that addiction for something else. So I'm just like.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Johnson, absolutely appreciate everybody's point of views. Within the bill, it does say that once the threshold reaches a certain point, that it goes back into the general fund for these appropriations. If it pleases the committee, if they would like to reappropriate what is left to another mental health program, they can. Again, we are just grateful that this is being discussed and taken seriously, whatever is at the purview of the committee.
Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I guess maybe I'll look at it another way. If you could tell me if this would work like this. My thought was once a person would come into the system with a gaming problem, then they could be directed towards other services. Let's just say your number one thing you like to do is gambling, right? Then you could be directed further into the system once you're in it and trying to seek help. Is that what you think it would be? Or I guess to be clear on the intent of it being for problem addictive gaming, that's just the entry point. So with that in mind, would it work that they would be re-referred typically, and it's probably a Department of Health question possibly, but re-referred to other services once they get person that request help into the system? What are your thoughts?
Please.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Kolb, absolutely, that it would be the entry point, but definitely not necessarily the end of care. I think the way that you described it is, dead on. As far as you get in the door, if you are in need of something else, for example, trauma treatment, then our state contracted community mental health centers can re-refer you. Case managers within our state contracted community mental health centers will do that financial literacy piece if that is also a need. And so I think you are correct in understanding kind of the infrastructure of the behavioral health division and our state contracted community mental health centers.
Just a question about our state community health centers that are within each local entity. Does each one staffed with approximately the same individual to help with these addictive behaviors? Or is it kind of regionalized where maybe Natrona County services some smaller communities like Fremont County?
Madam Chairwoman, that's going to be hard for me to answer on the fly. What I can get for you is through the Mental Health Licensing Board is how many of the general practitioners, mental health practitioners we have, as well as how many of the licensed addiction therapists, as well as addiction certified specialists that we have within the state. We can start to break down that data regionally if that helps the committee develop a bigger picture.
Yes, please. I would request that you send that over so the committee has it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councilman Sweeney, thank you for your patience. Good to see you.
No, thank you, committee. My name's Pat Sweeney. I'm from Casper. I am on Casper City Council, but I am speaking individually. I have not sought permission to speak on behalf of WHAM or the city of Casper. With those clarifications, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, Lean, for coming to one of our gaming as we're working through Senate File 45 and trying to get our act together here in Casper. We currently have a moratorium for the next 6 months on any kind of putting a pause on any additions to the marketplace or changes until we figure all the nuances of Senate File 45. You came, Madam Chairwoman, to 2 weeks ago. We had one of our subgroup meetings working through this and brought to the attention this particular bill draft. And so I came to talk about that today. I'm totally in favor of this. I don't know quite how, without upsetting some of my friends in the industry, currently, as I believe, skill-based games and the lottery pay into the 300,000. And for some reason, I missed it in the past as far as historic horse racing. And I think we approved something for online, but when those bills came through, so I think this is a fair way to approach it. My only regret is it does pull money away from LISRA. But I think this is a fair way of probably doing it. Part of the problem currently with the 300,000, there's just not enough money as an example, and you may already have these numbers from the Department of Health. But let's take as an example, Niobrara County would only be allotted, according to the population formula, $1,547. What can you do? You can't even take care of a park for 1,547. So that's why there's still left in, according to one memo that I saw from the Department of Health, I think there was left in the fund like 75,000 because some of the counties just don't have the ability to do anything here in Natrona County. And I apologize to the committee. I didn't jump on this quick enough, and I did get with our Natrona County Casper Health Department director yesterday, and she did provide the chairwoman with the kind of overview letter of what we get here in Casper, approximately $50,665 for Natrona County. With that, they are contracting with Central Wyoming Counseling Center up on the hill. They're also looking at a program that Laramie County currently has on financial services. But again, even that 50,000 isn't a great deal of money to provide the services and try to make relevant steps. So what I would offer also is, one of the things we're trying to look at as City of Casper is there relevant training that we can put into our agreements and our process in accordance with Senate File 45 with, is there a problem gaming, problem gambling, service similar to the TIPS training for alcohol servers to recognize. We don't know the answer to that, but that's something that we're thinking about in incorporating, whether it's a resolution or an ordinance, in complying and getting ready for Senate File 45, which is already active. But I am speaking in favor. I think to start, I would agree with the director in that probably it's better. I totally get and respect trying to put it into the Gaming Commission, but I also respect the commission in the director's comments that maybe we'd get better bang for the buck out of the Department of Health. And perhaps there's more sideboards. I don't know what those might be. I think we should also look at maybe starting the program with the 15% number and see how it goes. And maybe, 2 years from now, we could look, the legislature could look at that. Did it need to go to 20% as an example? But I think this is a great program into Senator Kolb. I totally agree. Are we throwing money into the air? I don't believe so. I think you guys have done great work here and appreciate your work and the industry's work on Senate File 45. But those are my comments individually. So
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Any questions for Mr. Sweeney? None.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? Hello, welcome.
Good morning, committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ann Clement. I'm the Executive Director at Wyoming 211. Here to talk a little bit about the infrastructure that can go along with the concept that you all are contemplating. Just for a point of background, if you're not familiar with 211, it's a 3-digit code that was established by the FCC back in 2000 to take the pressure off of 911. So people were calling in with personal emergencies. I don't have food for my family. My electricity's been turned off. I'm about to be evicted. And the dispatchers at 911 were not equipped to handle that. So Wyoming established their 211 in 2011 as a nonprofit based in Laramie County. We started off covering 13 counties with about 87 resources. We now cover the entire state with nearly 3,300 Wyoming-specific resources. So that includes things like utility assistance and food assistance, but it can also include things like access to mental health, addiction support, gambling support. And we already have the infrastructure for not only the call center, but also the outreach to our community partners in a marketing capacity as well. So as you're thinking through this process of how do we then, once we've created the correct pathway to connect people, how do we get the word out? How do we ensure that they otherwise know where to turn? We have a 24/7 website where they would have access to all of those resources at their fingertips, in addition to being able to call into the call center where we will do an intake with them, establish what other needs they have. To your point, Representative Johnson, if they have a gambling problem, they probably haven't paid their mortgage, and there could be other things that they need help with. So just to keep that at the front of your mind as you're going through this process, that there is already a state partner who is available for you to help roll this out across the state. And I'll stand for any questions.
Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you. Just to your point, just so you kind of maybe have a different understanding of this process, we typically don't micromanage to that level on particular things. We draft legislation that it puts it in place, and I think there's a great opportunity in the future to speak to whomever will be the folks that will be the managers of this, to your point. But you know, if we got into that kind of minutia, we're all part-time volunteer people kind of. So I do appreciate your comment though, because you're right, it has to be looked at thoroughly.
Madam Chair, Senator Kolb, to your point, I certainly understand, sir. But as we go through finding solutions, understanding that there's a way to actually roll out the process is certainly an important part of it. So thank you.
Ms. Clement, could you speak to, is there currently anything on your website that directs people that have problem gaming on where to go or who to contact?
Madam Chair, so there isn't necessarily like a tab that would say addiction needs or problem gambling needs, something along that line. Our website's set up a little bit like a Google search where there's a bar that says search resources, and it prompts you then to a location where you can start to type in things. Gambling disorders, addiction counseling, those are some of the taxonomy guides that are available when you start to type in what you're looking for. So it does prompt you with some options. And once you select what you're looking for, or just choose to type in something that's more specific to your query, it will give you back the results of anybody with a word find in their agency description or the taxonomy that is attached to it to direct you to the services in your area.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you for your comments, Ms.
Thank you.
Clements. Have a great day. Mr. Ridgway, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Kyle Ridgway, President of 307 Horse Racing in Wyoming Downs. I'll keep my comments brief. We are in support of this bill. I just wanted to address some factual issues related to some of the conversation around how much skin in the game or how much operators are putting in on the historic horse racing side towards these services. So as I was listening to Councilman Sweeney talk about how much money is available from the state health department, $300,000 or whatever, I'd just like to point out that in 2025, the city of Casper received $2.3 million in completely discretionary funds from HHR tax revenue. And this issue with the Casper Health Department is somewhat personal to me because my wife and I ran a family foundation that gave grants to the health department for years to provide maternal health care in Natrona County and struggled mightily to get allocations from Natrona County and the city of Casper to the health department to support those programs. And I know I know that's a controversial area, but my point would be City of Casper in 2025 received $2.3 million. Natrona County received almost $2.9 million. So that's well over $5 million in annual discretionary tax revenue funds from our industry that can be allocated however that local community sees fit. And so the reason we're supportive of the bill is because we don't believe it's necessary at all for there to be a tax increase or for operators to have skin in the game. There was $25 million last year, according to the Gaming Commission, in distributions to cities and counties, and an almost matching, a significant amount in LISRA too. So we think the existing framework is workable because there's plenty of money available to fund these programs, and we're absolutely supportive of there being funding for these programs. But I just want to caution that when we have governmental entities say that there's not enough money available, I would argue that's because they have chosen not to allocate money to these programs more than it is the programs are there. Because when we've gone through the permitting process in many of these communities, I've personally made it clear, like, this goes straight into your overhead. You can use this money however you want if you want to put it aside for whatever your pet project may be, affordable housing initiatives, problem gaming, or other, services that the governmental entities can offer. Goshen County uses their money as matching funds for grant programs that they've never had before. So I just think it's important to point out that there's a lot of money there, and we think the way the bill is structured to use that money to allocate towards this is well worthwhile. And I don't have an opinion on whether the health department's the right place for that to be or not. I would just agree with the conversation that you have to have boots on the ground, individual providers that can provide care. But there's plenty of tax revenue being generated from this industry as it stands to allocate however this committee sees fit towards those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridgway. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Is there anyone online?
Yes, I have Brittany Wardle from CRMC, and then after she speaks, we'll have Robin Medina from the lottery.
Thank you. We're gonna run with our break and then come right back in and have Ms. Wardle be our first testimony, followed by the lottery. So we'll resume in 10 minutes, so 10:12. We'll bring the committee back to order. And we'll start with online. Ms. Wardle.
Good morning, committee, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, and committee members. Thank you for giving me time to testify today. My name is Brittany Wardle. I am with Cheyenne Regional Medical Center, and I am responsible for the gambling prevention and treatment funds here in Laramie County, as well as the community prevention grant, which funds substance use and mental health, also from the Department of Health. So I work here locally with all of those funds. As you consider this bill here before you, I do agree with many of the folks that spoke before. Problem gambling is a public health issue. So I do agree that keeping it with the Department of Health is hugely beneficial because they are the public health agency in our state. I think Director Laramundi said it best, right? They are regulating the industry. They are sometimes at odds with the work that happens for prevention. And so we want to be mindful of that. And I do think the health department has infrastructure that could be beneficial for this work across the state. I will tell you in terms of dollars being used effectively at the county level that I feel like we have done that here in Laramie County. Our portion of the funding is around $65,000 a year, which is likely the most of any county. It is certainly still not what we would need to operate fully, but we've made good use of it. We have contracts in place with our treatment providers, including our community mental health center. We've conducted an environmental scan that the chair referenced earlier. We have also made sure that we have infrastructure to assist with financial counseling for folks who have gambling debt. And we've also involved our peer support folks. So we have Gamblers Anonymous operating here in Laramie County, as well as some additional peer support offered through Recover Wyoming. So as you think about this bill moving forward, I would just ask that you be mindful of those counties that have been operating in this space and have been doing so diligently and effectively, because we would love to be able to continue to do so. And I do think there is huge benefit to centralizing this at the state level, because what we've seen has been somewhat disjointed, right? There are multiple agencies that are tasked with doing different things with different pots of money. So I do think that could be hugely beneficial. And with that, I know we're short on time, so I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Webb.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My question for the person is, how much money would Laramie County need to be able to function fully?
Madam Chair, Representative Webb, that's an excellent question. I think where we stand currently is that many folks in Wyoming aren't aware of even basic level resources to assist with problem gambling, that they aren't familiar. So I think we're falling behind on the public awareness approach, which could be done statewide and not at the county level. From a perspective of additional funding per year, I think we could probably do significantly more if we had even 100,000 a year. The thing I do want to bring up is I'm very mindful that many of the smaller counties, as alluded to earlier, don't even have enough funding to make this meaningful. And we have offered and reached out to say that we could bring their money into the fold and also support some of those smaller counties. I think what helps make the community prevention grant so impactful is that every county has a base level award. That means they all start from the same place initially, and then an additional amount is added per population. I think that could work well here and also help those smaller counties that have an amount that can't be effectively used currently.
Thank you. Further questions? Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just, are you aware of, I don't know the number, but the amount of money the city and the county receives when it comes to wagering revenue? And do they contribute, or what do they contribute, if, I don't know what the amount is, to your organization and what you're trying to accomplish? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I have looked at the amounts previously, but I couldn't recall them off the top of my head. I will tell you the only funding we receive is what is allocated from the $300,000 that comes at the state level. We don't receive any additional funding for this.
Follow up?
Yeah, follow-up question. Have you asked for more money for those entities?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, we have not asked for additional funding yet. We are reaching the point, we're in probably our third year as operating as a collaborative together, working on this issue, where we have expended or allocated and obligated all of our funds that we have to date. So it's taken us a while to start up for a number of reasons. There's a lot of nuance in gambling, but we have not requested additional funding to date.
Thank you.
Further questions for Ms. Wardle? Thank you for joining us remotely today. We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn, the next one.
Ms. Medina, if you want to go ahead and turn on your camera and unmute your microphone.
Welcome, Ms. Medina.
Good morning. Good morning, Co-Chair Kolb and Co-Chair Lean and members of the Select Gaming Committee. My name is Robin Medina, and I am the Chief Operations Officer at the Wyoming Lottery. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today on behalf of the Wyoming Lottery and provide you with an update. As was mentioned, the lottery state statute requires us to allocate up to $200,000 each year for supporting responsible gambling, and that's in collaboration with the Department of Health. So right when the lottery launched, we started those discussions with the Department of Health and really trying to figure out what we would prioritize and where the funding would go. After initial meetings, we realized that we really needed to bring more stakeholders to the discussion and to help us with the decision-making on where those funds would go. So then we created the Wyoming Responsible Gambling Coalition, also known as the WRGC. The coalition includes a diverse group of individuals that represent the gaming industry, but also treatment professionals. We meet on a regular basis and we talk about trends in our individual organization, and we also use the insights to help us determine where the lottery funds for problem gambling will go. So far, over the last 10 years, we have executed 3 statewide awareness campaigns on responsible play. We also conducted 3 studies. One of the studies will be concluded by the end of the summer, and we'll be able to share that. We also provide education to providers on how to treat problem gambling. We partner with the University of Minnesota Duluth, and we will pay for that certification and that training for any provider that would like to be able to expand into treating gambling. We also support Wyoming programs such as the Wyoming Council on Problem Gambling. We do help them fund some of their efforts and help support them. We also provide education for coalition members, whether you're in the gaming environment or you are a treatment professional. We allow for training, it could be online training or it could be in-person conferences. And as Wyoming's only state-operated gaming organization, we continue to be committed to protect Wyoming residents and our players through promoting responsible gambling, providing education on problem gambling treatment, and also very important to make sure that those resources that are available, that we're out there promoting that and marketing that. We will continue to work with the WRGC, but ultimately we will fully support and implement whatever decision is made regarding this bill. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Medina. Any questions? Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a question, you mentioned up to $200,000. What is it exactly? What has it been, if it's varied? Has it always been 200,000 or could you help me out with exactly what we're talking about here for the amount of money you're putting towards this problem gaming issue?
Yes, Chairman Kolb. So we get in front of the board whenever that amount is depleted. We get in front of the board for their approval to transfer the 200,000 over to our problem gambling fund. There have been times when we've started to deplete it, but we have research happening and we know that we're going to need funds to be able to execute whatever the research is telling us, whatever strategies and insights that we glean from the studies. And so there have been years, if it hasn't been depleted, it might not be 200,000 every year, but it's been very frequent that it has been. And especially with the studies that we're doing, we have a very engaged coalition right now, a lot of experts, a lot of opportunity to further our reach in what we're doing.
Follow up?
Well, thank you for that answer. The other question I'll have is, as this bill is, I guess some of the proposed amendments may be to sweep your money into this pot of money for the purpose of dealing with addictive gambling and associated follow-up that might happen. Did I hear you right? You in favor of that, or do you have issues with that, or what is your comments about this, I guess, strategy about trying to funnel our money into one pot, as it may be, so we can more effectively, in my mind, more effectively deal with this issue?
Yes, Chairman Kolb, great question. And like the others that have spoken today, we do support this. And we do believe that the more money that you have, the further the reach of what you can do is. And so we're very supportive of this. And that also makes sure that we're all aligned in what we're doing. There are a bunch of pots happening right now, but you know, some of the folks, even from the Gaming Commission, are part of the coalition. And so we are pretty aligned, but it is an opportunity to take the funds, maximize the funds, and get further reach.
Follow up? No.
Good.
Thank you for your comments. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When the lotto gave you this money, was $200,000, was that in the original lotto bill that was just, and has that ever increased? I mean, I'm sure we're selling more lotto tickets now than we were when we began.
Yes, Madam Chair. So in terms of the, I apologize, it kind of broke up. My internet is not that great here. I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Has Wyoming Lotto always had $200,000 to spend? When the original bill, that was the $200,000, and that has not increased in the last 10 years. I mean, it's just a set fee.
Madam Chair, yes, it has always been 200,000, and those funds come from our unclaimed prize money. So all of those winning tickets that folks don't claim before the expiration date go into this fund. And that unclaimed prize fund can only be used to pay out prizes or to support responsible gambling.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is the total amount of unclaimed prize money per year?
Madam Chair, I'm going to have to get that information for you. You'd be surprised how many people don't claim their winnings. I guess I am kind of surprised, but I would have to get that information for you.
We look forward to seeing those numbers. Thank you for being able to do that. Further questions? Thank you for your testimony today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there further online public comment? Further comments in the room? Direction from the committee. Discussion on the bill draft in front of us?
I'd move the bill draft.
The bill draft has been moved. Is there a second? Second by Senator Craigo. Amendments? Do you want to walk through it page by page? How would the committee like to proceed?
Madam Co-Chair, I think let's try to have take amendments first, just in a general term, because the nature of this bill is pretty broad. I think that might be a beginning point. If it doesn't work, I'll leave it up to your deference, Madam Chair.
Senator Craigo.
Madam Chairman, and we maybe got ahead of ourselves. Instead of moving the bill, and maybe the co-chairman and I could back up a step. I mean, I think we're I'm guessing we're gonna have significant amendments to this, and we maybe just want to have another draft for our last meeting. Rather than move the bill for formal introduction or whatever. So we might want to go that route and just ask LSO to make some changes to the bill and then have it ready for our final meeting.
I'll rescind my motion.
Just so everyone's clear where we're at this point, we'll take committee discussion on the bill and then choose where to move forward from there. Discussion on the bill. Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I would first move for amending the bill that we sweep all monies, as we just discussed, from the lottery, all accounts into this fund. That would be the first. I mean, this is probably going to be a more general structural thing as we go along with the LSO. But that would be my first thought on this, is that we sweep all accounts. And I could continue, but I'll just leave it at that right now.
Further discussion?
I'd second the motion if that's what it is.
Representative Webb.
Just for clarification, what does all mean?
All related gaming activities, lottery, and everything that is not encompassed in this current bill draft. I think, what are we missing? We got lottery, and I think there's one other, LSO.
Mr. Chairman, Tamara Rivley here. I believe lottery is the only one that's not included, that there's currently a statutory distribution or type of gaming that, at least, there's also charitable gaming and exemptions from the gambling that happen, pull tabs and bingo, and none of those are included. Right now, lottery is the only one missing from this bill.
Thank you. Then the clarification, just the lottery, sweeping the lottery monies into this proposed bill draft.
So this potential amendment has been moved and seconded by Kolb and Crago. Discussion on this amendment. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to include all unclaimed prizes at the lotto as to go into this fund for gaming.
So a friendly amendment to the amendment to bring in the unclaimed prize money account as well.
Just for discussion's sake, I'll probably need to know more about that. We don't know how much it is. We don't know what it is. I'm not opposed to it. I guess we're not going to have a bill draft today anyway to move forward. So we're going to have another meeting. Representative Johnson, if I could say that, Mike wasn't co-chair. So I'm not opposed to it, but I'd certainly like to know more about it before we sweep it. That would be my concern, is I just don't know what we're sweeping.
Senator Crago.
Madam Chairman, I guess I would suggest, just for drafting purposes, that we just include a percentage, and for today's purpose, we can say 100%, but then at our next meeting, if we can hear some more from the lotto folks, maybe we lower that number down to 10% or 20% or leave it at 100%. I don't know, but that, for drafting purposes, I think that would be the easiest. And then we can change it. Yep, later if we need to.
Well, I'll consider that a friendly amendment, Madam Chair.
Senator McEwen.
Didn't I hear all the unclaimed prizes have to go to this account?
I'm going to ask LSO to answer that question.
Thank you. Right now, under statute, the unclaimed prize money is in 917-119. And unclaimed prize money shall be used to offset prize expenses. A portion of unclaimed prize money not to exceed $200,000 annually shall be used by the corporation to develop, in consultation with the Department of Health, programs for the treatment of compulsive gambling disorder and educational programs related to this disorder. So right now, under existing law, it's used for prize expenses as well as this up to $200,000. Then you heard from the lottery about how much that has been. There's probably other restrictions and things to learn about the account and how, when it becomes unclaimed, what the amount of time and all of that is, and we can come back with that information.
Senator McEwen, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I certainly misunderstood the testimony. I thought the lottery lady said it had to all go to it. So I apologize for the question.
Further discussion on this amendment to sweep the monies from the lottery to be included in this next bill draft? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries. And further amendments for this bill draft? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That we would make an amendment that we would require approval by appropriations for the allocations of money from this fund for the purposes of this bill. Instead of it just being within house, it would go through the appropriations process, and they would have a chance then. The reason why I think this is they would have a chance to review what they're doing, check the effectiveness, have discussions, and then make an approval. Then the allocation, once the allocation is done, then it's managed.
And hold them responsible for the spending. In essence, is that what you're saying?
So
Well, yeah, it would hold the legislative process through the appropriations process responsible, which is the legislative body. It'll eventually come to us in an appropriations bill for approval. So we can just keep a handle on it legislatively to know what's going on with the monies. Are they being spent? The big question is, how are they being spent? Is it effective? Is it working? Whatever we're doing, it would give us a process that we wouldn't just offload the money and hope for the best. So that for an administrative oversight or legislative oversight.
So this amendment would be in accordance with page 6 that we are subject to appropriations for spending. Is there a second? I'll second it. Discussion on this amendment?
So
Representative Johnson.
we're gonna appropriate this money, but we don't have anybody to spend it yet. And what I'm saying is we're gonna give this pile of money to an agency and we have no oversight over it. That's where I want to do. I want to have somebody accountable for the money they're spending. And I don't know how to get to that point, but.
That's
Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, to that end, Representative Johnson, that's what this would do. In my mind, I think the LSO understands the intent of the amendment is to have the appropriations process approve said monies to be expended. In other words, it'll collect in an account, and then the appropriation is going to be approved by the legislative process through appropriations. So it wouldn't just be spent. I mean, is that, I guess, to the LSO, Tamara, is that make sense? Is it clear?
Thank you. The way I'm interpreting this amendment would be on page 2. It's around line 16 and 17, where it says that funds in the responsible gaming and problem gambling account are continuously appropriated to the commission to be expended as provided in the section. Rather than having that money continuously appropriated, it would say that funds shall only be expended upon legislative appropriation. So it would set them aside, but reserve for the legislature to actually appropriate them. Right now, under this statute, they're just continuously appropriated. That means the authority is ongoing. We know how much is coming in from the percentages, and the legislature is just putting it in the green books that it's ongoing, always appropriated and available for these purposes. By making it subject to legislative appropriation, it would sit there and would not be expended until appropriated. So what would probably accompany this amendment would be an appropriation at the end of the bill if you want to go ahead and start before the next budget cycle to select how much should be used in the first year, or the first 2 years. But that's kind of a policy decision. You can always just set it up and have it appropriated through the next budget cycle.
Senator Craigo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I feel like we might be getting into micromanaging how all of this is going to be spent. I don't have a problem with us having some sort of oversight, but if we're approving every expenditure through the budget, which is what I know that's not the co-chairman's intent, but that's how it's going to end up being drafted based on the motion. I'm not for that. I won't support that idea. I'm totally fine with us getting hearing about, having them report, having the commission or the Department of Health, if we end up going that direction, reporting to appropriations during the annual, budget reviews, saying, here's where the money's going to go. Here's where the money went last year. I think that's totally fine, but I think we got to be careful about how we do that. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a bunch of expenditures that don't happen because we'll be having to vote on each individual one during the committee process. I know that's not the intent, but that's how it's coming across.
Well,
Co-Chair Kolb.
yeah, thank you. This goes to the LSO. Tamara, is there a way to word it that they would just have basically an approval of a request for the biennium of X amount of dollars, right? And then they would go off and spend that money, whatever that number is. I obviously don't want any issue with approving individual line items. The issue is they would have a budget request. They would just go in front of the appropriations committee. That's where it would be vetted at. And then they would explain their request, and they would kind of like the Department of Health expenditure. We don't micromanage them either. We give them a block of money and they go off and spend it. So is there a way of wording it that all they would do is approve a request? I'm afraid if we don't have some sideboards on this money is going to be spent in a way that really there's no at all any legislative oversight when it comes to what we've done with it. And I want that kind of a fail-safe system in there that we would have some appropriations would approve a block of money, not anything really more than that.
If I might interject, just one thought process about the budgeting process for the Wyoming Gaming Commission. If they have an oversight for a dollar amount that is to be appropriated, is it possible that they could put that in their budget so that it is explained to appropriations but comes through their budget?
That's true.
Thank you. And these are interesting questions and could be structured in a variety of ways. Right now, it's just a continuous appropriation of up to the entire amount of the account. There could be a cap, not to exceed $1.5 million annually, or biannually not to exceed $3 million or something of that sort. We can direct that they submit their budget request. And right now, this would fall under the existing statutes, the governed budget submittals and supplemental budget submittals. This would become part of the Gaming Commission, or if it's a different department, a different department's budget, and would be submitted like any other program within their budget or their division and their expenditures. We can direct that it be a general ask through the budget submittal process. We cannot really restrict what a future legislature decides to do or how they might decide to, add details that they would like to see the money be used. But we can direct that it generally be appropriated kind of through a block grant process, or put language in the fund there to indicate that that's the intent of the legislature, that there be some accountability through more of a block grant than individual program and line items and employees. So I can work with that sponsor if they would like to, or the move-in if they'd like to see something on that or get some ideas on that. Otherwise, a cap is an idea. Finally, just complete legislative control, subject to legislative appropriation. Having that, you'd also see that in the end of this bill if you went ahead and appropriated it for the next year, and you could direct that appropriation. You could just say it generally, this money is appropriated for up to $1 million for any of the purposes specified in this act, as determined by whatever agency is selected. So there's a couple of ideas and options to kind of work with, but maybe some of those might accomplish your goals or address your concerns.
Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah. Thank you, Tamara. I think maybe if you could work through this a little bit, I'm going to withdraw this proposed amendment. If we could work through and get some options possibly on how this could be done without having, punitive oversight. So it's in a very broad way, kind of like we'd approve funds for the Game and Fish. They want to build a building. They have a fund through licensing that we would approve through, I think it's CapCon, for an expenditure. That was my thought, but maybe it doesn't work. There might be another way of doing this, but maybe if you could think about it and come up with maybe a way that was not overly administrative over this. I don't want to restrict the funds. I just want to make sure they're spent in a way that legislatively we're aware of. I mean, that could be a report, we generate a mandatory report, a progress report or something. This is going to get really complicated really fast. So that was the intent. So I guess I would, Madam Chair, I'll withdraw my motion to make this amendment right now. We have time to think about this for the next meeting. But that was the reason for bringing it up committee. I thought it was important that we discuss what do we want to do? Do we just want to let it run wild and hope for the best, or, you know, are we going to try to have some oversight legislatively to make sure it's working? That was my concern.
Senator Craigo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a question for Tamara, and maybe we could put this in non-codified. I mean, I'd be tickled if we had a report to this committee so long as it's in existence. That could change it after the election. We don't know, but I know we're the ones super invested in it right now. I think we could possibly do that. We don't necessarily have to even put it in the bill draft. I suppose the committee the chairman can just request that we get a report on that as part of our report from whether it's Department of Health, Gaming Commission, wherever this ends up. I'm guessing we could get a report no matter what, whether it's in the bill draft, non-codified or not. But just that's one thought. We can definitely get the information presented to us so we know. And if we don't like how it's being spent, we can change the statute.
Representative Webb.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. In that report, could we also know where the money is currently going? And if that's known now, I'd like to know if it's all to the Department of Health. Is it to the Department of Health and the Gaming Commission? Just so we have it in our brain as we're mulling things over the next few weeks here.
So Ms. Schaefer, if you'd be willing to tell us a quick snip on where the money is currently going and when it's allocated and the amounts that are given, if it's going to cities or counties. Thank you. Further discussion on this draft?
Oh, I withdrew it. Oh, you mean, I'm sorry.
Senator Craigo.
Madam Chairman, I think we need to decide. I mean, I'll make a motion that we, and I don't know what the exact percent, but I think we use percentage as how we figure out how much we are actually going to allocate to the fund. I mean, we have the chart that's 15%, 20%, 25%, and I don't think we need to go higher than 15%. So for purposes of making my motion, I'll just say 15%. That might be too high, but I'm going to make that motion as of right now.
15% of that.
This chart.
The chart. Second.
So it's been moved and seconded that we go with 15% to fill in the blank on page 3 of the bill draft. It would be approximately coming off of the 2025 distribution, it would be $1,325,149. Any discussion on that amendment?
15%.
All those in favor of
Aye.
adopting this? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
This one does move forward. Further amendments?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So on our break, I was just trying to figure out the chart a little bit because and one of the issues is, so a certain amount goes into the account, and at every quarter, anything that's in excess of 1.5 million goes to LSRA. So there's set percentages, those are minimums, and then anything over 1.5. And so this might just be sort of a conceptual thing for LSO, because depending on what the 15% is, so it says annually we're going to shift over 15% annually, but quarterly we're draining that account down to 1.5. There could be an instance where the amount is more than's in the account at the end of the quarter. And so I don't know if we'd rather, this is going to become a math bookkeeping type question or suggestion, but maybe instead of annually, we make that a quarterly distribution to the gaming or to the problem gaming account as well, so that we're not getting in a circumstance where we don't have the amount in the account to transfer over. And I know we can take care of that, but just a thought, instead of annually, that money gets shifted quarterly as well.
There's a motion on the floor to move from annual to quarterly to keep our bookkeeping uniform. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That one is moved forward. Further, Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I would move that we would move these services to the Department of Health when it comes to the mental services for addictive gambling problems instead of underneath the Gaming Commission. I don't know, we probably have to work on the wording, but the Gaming Commission would have a part in it, but they wouldn't provide those services. I think maybe if I could, Madam Chair, if Director Laramundi would want to speak about this, maybe on some language that he thinks would fit better, possibly as part of the conversation. If it's
Moved by Kolb, seconded by Lean. Director?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, could you kind of repeat just so I understand what we're looking for?
Well, Madam Chair, so the intent is that we move the mental health care services under the Department of Health, not under the Gaming Commission.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, so I think, yeah, and this would be really probably a better question for LSO because I'm not an attorney and I don't draft legislation. But I would think that going through this bill, if they just changed where it says, the commission to the Department of Health, I think that would probably move everything on this. This isn't going to change what we do currently in our office. We still have a responsible gaming liaison that would take part in these meetings and discussions and do outreach. We do a lot of public education and brochures for all of our licensed operators. We run the responsible gaming page on our website we would just have to, make some changes to that to move these people to better resources that are available. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Director.
Representative Webb.
For discussion, how many people do we have that take advantage of the problem gambling thing each year? Are we looking now at having to have more employees for the Department of Health? Are we looking at growing government? That would be a concern of me.
Director, do you happen to know how many folks are currently seeking help for problem gambling and gaming?
Madam Chair, Representative Webb, I do not know how that, and I think that's kind of difficult to ascertain right now because the way the funding is working, they get the $300,000 from the online sports wagering at the start of every fiscal year. That goes to the Department of Health and then they disperse it based on a formula to each county. So each county currently is kind of running their own quasi programs. That was really the driving force by trying to centralize this and get it in one place to where we can start really, making sure that this money is being used to treat problem gaming. Because right now, I don't have the answer to that question.
Ms. Schaefer, when you gather the information moving forward for us, could you also make one plank, the counties and if they have any data on how many folks are currently being treated? Thank you. Further discussion on this current or questions for the director? So in front of us is a conceptual amendment to keep it at the Department of Health with the Wyoming Gaming Commission, a liaison / oversight coming forward. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, no. This one is moved forward. Further amendments for this piece of legislation? Senator Crago.
Madam Chairman, I'm probably not going to make an amendment today, but I think we should have a conversation with our counties and our, local prevention specialists. Right now, they get a certain amount of money is dedicated to go back to the counties. I want to make sure that continues going forward because they're the boots on the ground. They're the, they're working with our local people back in our homes, back in our home counties. And so I don't have an idea right now, but I think it's something we think about for our next meeting. And once we get the other, get our revised bill draft back, maybe we can see a spot where we can figure out how to do that, because I think that's important. And to several of our concerns about growing government, right now, those are the folks doing it. I'd like to see that continue. And that way we don't necessarily have to add additional state employees. We continue letting the folks back home that are doing the job, keep doing the job and make sure some of this money goes to them. But just, that's probably something for the next meeting, Madam Chairman.
Representative Johnson.
So if I get this right, it would just have a flow through from the Department of Health to the counties. And the counties would take over the actual administration and treatment.
Madam Chairman.
Co-Chair Crago, or Senator Crago.
I mean, that's happening now. They're already doing that. I mean, that's happening in all of our counties. I mean, we've heard a little bit about that, but I just like us to keep doing that and make sure some of this. I mean, right now, some of the counties don't get enough to even set up a program, and a lot of the counties are subsidizing it a huge amount, even though they get a certain amount of money. It's not enough to do all the things that the specialists are doing back home. But if we're going to dedicate more money to the problem and to the project, then we could send more money back to the counties and they would have more abilities, better abilities to do some of that.
Co-Chair Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is the question. This is kind of how we got to this topic about combining money. I think there's probably something to be said about allocation at, say, the Department of Health, kind of similarly what they're doing now, where they'd allocate money, but it's done by population. I think we have to be very careful. If we dilute this money too much, we're still not going to have any money for those counties to do anything. In other words, that's the problem in Wyoming. Our population is so small and diverse and spread out. We can't have a hospital in every town. And we can't do a lot of things in every town we'd like to do. So I think the intent behind the bill is trying to be effective with the money. And if we dilute it, with dispersal to, I'll just use Niobrara as an example, a tiny county, the twofold question. They've got a real low population. And then how many folks have gaming addictions there? I don't know. But we've got to, as legislators, I think it's our job to look at it and go, well, we realize there's not going to be 100% buy-in on this because they're going to change their current fiscal situation. But what are we better off doing? Dispersing the money into a point where it does nothing, or trying to concentrate it to a point where it does something? And then they do have local folks that deal with those people, the boots on the ground as it may be, that can go out there and interact with these people. But I guess I wouldn't be opposed to trying to take the excess money and disperse it, into the counties. But I think if we lose sight of, the addiction specialist, that very well might be having another person. I'm not opposed to that. If we have to hire people that are specialists in addiction counseling, so be it. We're dealing with an industry that's huge here and a problem that's getting worse. And granted, I'm also not wanting to grow government, but there's a time and place for everything. And this may be one of those places. You need people. I'm not going to, cut off my nose to spite my face and go, well, I'm sorry, I don't want to grow government, so I'm not going to even talk about hiring somebody who's a specialist. I think that's the legislative balance here is, when you have conflicting desires about not growing government, maybe they could shift the person with the Department of Health. I don't know. They may have somebody who could be specialized training or bring somebody in because there's an opening. Right now, they have maybe possibly an opening with the department. I don't know. It's probably a question for the director of the Department of Health and maybe we can get that answered in the next meeting so we all understand what it really means to have an addiction specialist, serving this issue. But it's a darn good question, and I think we have time to think about it.
Representative Johnson.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the Department of Health if you know how many counties currently have an addiction program Do you know? If I could,
I think he's directing it to Ms. Semino, and
Yes,
then
please.
is the Department of Health still online by chance?
Madam Chairman, they are online, but I don't know if they're actively monitoring. I've asked her to go ahead and turn on her phone and her microphone and camera if she is. If you'll give me just a minute. There she is.
Welcome back, Miss Angie. Did you happen to hear the question?
I did. I will have to check with the Behavioral Health Division on that question, and I believe it was how many counties have a specifically trained addiction specialist or behavioral health specialist for problem
Yes.
gambling, correct?
yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for reporting back to us. We appreciate your time. Ms.
Yes,
Semino,
of
do you
course.
have anything that you can add?
Madam Chairwoman, when we look at our state contracted community mental health centers, it is similar to our medical health care system where it is regional. So as it was stated earlier, we are able to do things in some towns that we are not. When I break down the licensure report, you will see 3 addiction specialties for the state of Wyoming. You will see a licensed addiction therapist, which is a master's level. You will see a CAP, which is a bachelor's level addiction practitioner, and then a CAPA, which is an addiction practitioner assistant. And that's going to be more of your associate level practitioners. All of them are focused on addiction, not necessarily gaming addiction, but addiction. And as we've talked about, it is a similar model. I can also do work to see which regional state contracted mental health centers have specified addictions programs. I do believe because they are state contracted, all of them have some level of addiction specialty built in them, but I would like to have that confirmed and have a report to you at a later date.
Representative Johnson,
Yeah.
follow up?
Yeah, thank you. My reasoning is that we already have these in some counties. If we just fund those counties more money, if you have a medical condition and you're in Rock River, you're probably going to go to a major center, in Cheyenne for treatment.
Sure.
And I'm just saying that the smaller counties, if we allow treatment of their residents in a different county, I think we could concentrate our money on a few good programs and disperse it throughout the state that way. And that was what I would like to do, not have it, Niobrara has another $1,000 a month. I mean, that doesn't do any good. So.
Thank you for getting us that information. We appreciate your time.
Madam Chairwoman, I would like to highlight the way that the community preventions grants work now in public health is that all the counties do get a flat rate, and then the counties with higher population do get additional funding based on that population. And something similar, I think, could be researched and proposed to you at the next committee meeting.
Thank you. Senator McEwen.
So would this money be like a block grant? Once it gets sent to the Department of Health, they can decide how to spend it? Or is it kind of siloed?
Senator McHugh and I would look back to page 5. It kind of gives you an outline on what it could be spent on. And then I would defer to LSO for further opining.
That's exactly correct. On page 5, beginning on page 4 is the allowable expenditures related to responsible gaming and prevention, identification, and recovery support for problem gambling. This is just an all-inclusive list of things, of options for expenditure, whether through contract directly. And so this is a broad list of expenditures for a specific purpose. It does not direct that it be done 50% at least go to counties, or that, a certain percent be used for this purpose. So this is broad. It would be up to the department to decide how to allocate. They could do 100% through counties distributed straight without any direct involvement, or they could do 100% in-house. So if the committee wants to better see or better craft that type of a program, or perhaps even have the department come back with a report to direct what they would like to set up, we could certainly narrow that down or put some more sideboards on how you'd like to see it run.
Senator McEwen, follow up?
No, I think my question's been answered. Thank you.
Further direction, Senator Craigo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I was just going to point out, I mean, right now, the way for example, we take the $300,000 that we've been talking about that is allocated minimum to the counties. A lot of the counties aren't taking that because they can't meet the requirements of the Department of Health to actually receive the money, which I'm fine with. I think that addresses several of, for example, the co-chairman's concerns. It's not just money going. What we need to figure out, though, is, for example, how to make sure that that extra money that's left over can go to other places where it could be used. And that probably is on a statewide basis. I think the co-chairman made some good comments, made some good points there but the counties that are using it effectively, let's let them continue to do the job. I don't think we can decide which of those counties it is. That would be up to the department, and they're doing that now. I mean, they're working with the counties. Some of the counties have programs that are very successful. Some of them don't have any, and some probably have some that maybe aren't successful. I don't know the answer to that. But my whole point is if it's working, let's keep doing it and maybe help it even some more. And then there would be additional money, as the good senator pointed out, on a statewide level where we can do some other things. So I think there's a happy medium in there between all of this where we can do a lot of good things with that particular set of money. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Might I ask, LSO, is there currently a regulatory process where a county that is not taking their money, say a larger county that's in need of more money, can they apply for the money that is currently not being utilized?
Thank you.
Madam Co-Chairman, I do not have the information, but I believe it was presented in a prior meeting. The Department of Health does have a system for redistribution.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, on page 7 is the existing law where you can see that it's not statutory. This distribution to counties based on population is not statutory right now. It's just generally on lines 5 through 7 on page 7 is that 300,000 is continuously appropriated to the Department of Health to be distributed to counties for the purposes of funding county health programs to prevent and treat problematic gambling behavior. So they have administratively interpreted that language to find a distribution model and work that in.
Thank you. Further comments on this bill draft? Co-Chair Cole.
Thank you. Chair. Just a thought for the committee. I was kicking around the idea of possibly having a trust account. And I'm not particularly a fan of trust accounts typically, but there may be a mechanism, this is something to think about, that instead of it going into the fund that we've trying to create right now, it could be in a trust and then pull the interest off the trust in perpetuity. That may be a mechanism to do this, just for something to think about. It'd be a way of safeguarding the money that came in from gaming to be used for gaming issues for now into the future. I don't know if that's, I just want to throw that out there to the committee that I think it's worth thinking about. Is that something we want to do? Is set it aside and keep the corpus and pull interest off of it. That way the industry does go up and down. Who knows what it's going to do in the future, because I assure you the competitors in our nearby states might be doing what we did here and changing the whole ball game as it may be. But just for consideration, I just wanted to add that. Thank you for the chance to comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, committee, for the discussion on this legislation. Seeing no further changes, we'll ask LSO to provide us with a new draft at the next meeting in September. Thank you, ladies, for your work on this. We appreciate it. We're going to move ahead to consideration of 27 LSO 0054 parimutuel events and the horse racing purse. And there is a second bill draft in this same section, and we'll go bill draft, public comment, work the bill, bill draft, public comment, work the bill.
So if everyone's ready, Tamara Everly with the LSO. This is 27 LSO 0054. You should have working draft 0.4. And I would like to thank Ms. Schaefer with LSO for working on this bill draft. I'll present it as the attorney here, but I appreciate her expertise in getting it drafted into this point. You'll recall that in May, the committee requested that there be a bill draft where a floor percentage of revenue from horse racing parimutuel events be dedicated to actual horse racing purses. So that's what this bill draft does. It's rather short. On page 1, it relates to in the title, just parimutuel events, not gaming generally, but just parimutuel events, specifies requirements for contributions of a portion of wagers from parimutuel events and provides an effective date. The statutes that it is amended is 1125-201. This is the parimutuel statutes. Subsection C is a conforming amendment where this is the amendment, the direction in existing statute that allows for 19.4 of the total amount wagered on parimutuel events that's shown by the report to be retained, plus an additional 5% for multiple or exotic wagers. This is also the section that we'll talk about in the next bill that includes a part on breakage. This new section, subsection N, is somewhat modeled on the breeder award that exists under statute. It requires that as a condition of receiving a permit, the operators have to agree to this condition, and that's to contribute to a horse racing purse that they would administer themselves, just like they already do, not less than X% of the total amount wagered attributable to historic horse racing parimutuel events, and not less than some percent for you to fill in attributable to live parimutuel events. It could be the same percent. You don't have to list them separately. They're just fairly different numbers and fairly different total handles. Then contributions under this subsection would only be allowed to be used to fund purses for live parimutuel horse racing events that are held at tracks in Wyoming. Then finally, the effective date would be July 1st, 2027.
Thank you. Any questions for LSO? Thank you, Ms. Tamra. Any public comment on this legislation? Oh, Director, we would love to hear from you. Sorry about that. I got ahead of myself.
Madam Chair, that's okay. I would have skipped over me too. So we're good. Just a couple of things, and I'll keep my comments strictly to a implementation and maybe an enforcement side of this. A couple of things that you may want to consider on this is the way purses are currently structured for like the 2026 season, it is based on the handle from the 2025 calendar year. So I think there's an opportunity in this bill that you could put, after you figure out the percentage part of it, it would be of the previous year's handle. That way it sustains the next racing season. One of the other things when I look at this, maybe for you to consider is it says, these are, the permittee is the one that administers this and they keep track of that, which is fine. We certainly don't want to do that, but we need to be able to verify that they are following this statute and they're contributing that percentage amount from their previous year's handled to purses. And kind of the way this is structured, it's a little difficult to do that, specifically on lines 19 through 21, where it says contributions under this subsection shall be used to fund purses for live parimutuel horse events that are held in Wyoming. This doesn't really tie those purses to their live event permit. And I think it's important to remember that a simulcast permit issued to a permittee is directly tied to their live event permit. They have to have that live event permit to even be able to qualify for a simulcasting permit. So if you look at that and you and I suppose there could be language put in there that says that the X percentage of that goes to fund purses under their live event permit. I mean, their live event permit is only going to be good in the state of Wyoming anyway. So there's an opportunity there. And then if you'd like, I mean, as far as a percentage goes, we don't really care one way or the other. I think a good starting point for you all maybe to consider would be like a 0.4. That way it would match up with the Breeders' Award Program. So the Wyoming Bred Program awards that we do out every year would be basically the same as we're paying out in purses. I think that's just an easy starting place. And I would stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Senator McEwen.
So we have the HHR stuff here in Natrona County and Casper, but no purses. So what happens if we pass this legislation? How does that money get transferred out of Casper and who decides where it goes?
Director?
Madam Chair, if I may. So each operator currently funds their purses at their race meets. So the OTBs that are operating in Casper, so we have three different operations happening in Casper. We have Wyoming Horse Racing, 307 Horse Racing, and Wyoming Downs. So at a Wyoming horse racing facility, the money that they're generating on their historic horse racing machines, it's funding the purses at their live race meet that happens in Rock Springs. So the passage of this legislation actually it's very helpful to the horsemen. I'll tell you, one of the things that the operators are currently required to do is enter into a horseman's agreement. And in that horseman's agreement, they have contractual obligations or contractual negotiations to allocate how much money they are going to pay in their purses or to their purses from the HHR revenues. That's always an area of contention when you have horsemen and operators. This makes it very clear. This makes it clear to the operators. This makes it clear to the horsemen that no matter what they do, whatever an operator does, they're going to have to contribute X percentage of their handle on their HHR machines to their purses. And I think that's important to remember. So for example, the one that I just brought up, Wyoming Horse Racing. So Wyoming Horse Racing has focused 2 new projects in Cheyenne and 1 in Evanston. From the 2024 race season to the 2025 race season, Wyoming Horse Racing's purses increased 60% in 1 year. And that was solely from the opening of the Swan Ranch property outside of Cheyenne. So that location that they invested that money in on that gaming side of it, it was definitely, it definitely showed in the horse racing side. Their overnights went from, $5,000 or $6,000 purses to $10,000 to $12,000 a person. They almost doubled. And they're on track to do another, I think, probably 6% or 60% increase from this year to next year with the opening of the one in Uinta County. So they're going to be pushing purse monies that the state of Wyoming has never seen before.
Follow up? Further questions? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a question about breakage. Here we're talking about breakage on line 6, page 2. The permittee shall retain breakage on not more than 10 cents. And I've had several people that go to the OTBs and there's 11 cents in there. And the operators zealously guard that 11 cents. You can't take it out without getting in trouble or getting booted out of the OTB establishment, 86th. So why even have that retainage? Why shouldn't that retainage just go to the purses? That breakage.
Madam Chair, would you like me to wait? Because that's the next bill that we're talking about is the breakage bill.
Yes, I was.
Okay.
If you're willing to hold the question and we can
Okay.
ask it again for working draft 0049. Thank you. It is language in both bill drafts, but we address that particular thing in
Okay.
0049. Thank you, Director. And Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to help out the committee, whenever it's in black like that, that's existing statute. So it was just copied in there. We'll get to it though. I do look forward to it, but yeah, it's not been modified in this bill draft. It is a bit confusing though, I do admit.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the room that would like to offer public comment on working draft 0054 on purse monies? And is there anyone online for this particular bill draft?
Madam Chairman, no, we don't have any online.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Please state your name and what you'd like the committee to hear.
Eugene Joyce with Wyoming Horse Racing.
Pete Lagori, Wyoming Horse Racing.
And Madam Chair and committee members, currently the way purses are calculated at our track is a private agreement between the representative horsemen's group and ourselves. And we have that contract in place through 2030. And so it's a bit problematical, I guess, if this is put into law, you know, that contract, does it go up, does it go down, what have you, I guess. Yes. So I just wanted to just state for the record, we do have a contract in place with the Horsemen's Group. They obviously think it's pretty fair as they've extended it through 2030. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, Madam Chair.
Committee, any questions? Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to be clear, any legislation that we pass will not supersede your contract that you've signed.
Okay.
If that's the question.
Okay.
So yeah, that's an existing contract. So no.
Okay.
So I believe if the LSO could probably answer this more than non-lawyer Senator Kolb. If you had an existing contract and there's legislation that passes, does that make your existing contract null and void? That's the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that's a good legal question. And yes, there are issues with the state impairing an existing obligation, and generally the state is not allowed to supersede law in some ways to impair existing contracts. One of the things that we often try to do when permits are involved and existing rights are involved are to include references that nothing in the act, a construction clause, that nothing in the act shall be construed to impair an existing obligation or contract, just to make clear that the legislature, as they passed it, envisioned that they were changing rights that were already out there and existent, and some guidance on how to interpret that, and that is to not violate the Constitution and impair an existing contract. Now, I don't know that there are certain areas, and they're always fact dependent and dependent on the court interpreting them, that the legislature can pass law to change contracts. If you have an illegal contract and the legislature makes some act illegal and you had a contract to do it, that doesn't change the fact that the legislature can do it. So it's kind of a policy test, and there's factors that courts look at to see if this is an area where the legislature is allowed to impair contracts. And I would say that, you know, what you might look at is when the permittee goes to renew, to receive their application, their contracts would need to match at that point. But you could see where you would get under a situation while the legislation is pending, contracts could be amended to last until, 2075. Or be long into the future. So while you might not want to impair existing contracts for the current permittees, that's where their rights originate from, their permit that's granted by the state to do this activity, you may consider changing that to the time they go to renew their permit. At that point, they have to come into compliance and they have to renegotiate their contracts if they want to continue to be permitted.
Thank you. Further questions for Eugene? Go ahead.
Coach Arlene, thank you. Actually, Eugene covered one of my points, which was we have this existing contract that runs to 2030. So it sounds like you're being sensitive to that. The other thing I would just say is that 100% of our purse calculation money goes towards purses. So I know there was some point about, does all of it go? Some of it, 100% of our calculation goes to the purse fund. That's all I had.
And Pete, also, we segment those monies from our operating cash in a separate account. So,
yes, we do keep that money separate.
Any questions? Co-Chair Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. As it pertains to the, your tracks and your simulcast permits for your different locations, are you in favor of having your simulcast locations feed the purse monies, to your, excuse me, the tracks feed the purse money to the simulcast locations? Do you understand what that line of questioning was about the split that Director Laramundi was talking about when it came to making sure that the money stayed with basically the operators?
Yes, I'll paraphrase. I think there was a discussion about, I believe, I can remember it was Representative Webb or Representative Johnson asked about what happens to Casper, or no, I think it was Senator McEwen asked a question about Casper. So what effectively happens is all of our OTB outlets, including the border properties, contribute to the pool for purses that ultimately benefits the entire state. Our track happens to be located in Rock Springs, but clearly attracting with larger purses, we're attracting national attention now, and that benefits the entire state. People coming in and racing.
Follow up?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm real clear on what your position is. So are you in favor of keeping it the way it is right now?
Yes, sir.
As opposed to a change? Maybe that's
Yes, sir.
a simpler way of saying it.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to confuse the issue. Sorry.
Okay. So you're in favor of keeping what we have currently?
Yes, sir.
The methodology of how we distribute money for purses?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further public comment on this bill draft? Please come forward. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Lean, my name is Affie Ellis. I'm with a law firm called Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck. I'm today here with you with representing Bally's, and I've also got a pal with me who's very familiar with the racing industry, the live racing industry, so I'll let him introduce himself.
My name is Shannon Rushton. I'm the Executive Director of Operations for Bally's Cheyenne Park that was formerly known as Thunder Plains. We have changed the name on it to Bally's Thunder Park, which is underneath Bally's Wyoming LLC. I do have some expertise on this as I'm also the General Manager of Bally's Arapahoe Park in Aurora, Colorado, and all the contracting issues that come into place with Horsemen's Purse Funds. I was a 25-year Executive Director of the Horsemen's Association in Colorado as well, so I understand both sides of the game on that. Us as the new kid on the block, we were going to step up and allocate $100,000 per day for a 16-day meet. So if you were to put a number in your statute right now, we could get off relatively easy because we're not doing much action right now. But we've seen the need to step up and be responsible to the horsemen and make it worthwhile their time to come to our track as well. We will also have the same horseman's contract in place that Mr. Joyce spoke of that will talk about daily purse allocations, things like that. So they will be protected with a horseman's contract as well. But we are more familiar with doing it contractually wise than statutorily wise.
Madam Chair, I just want to speak on some of the particulars of the bill. We've had conversations about, what this would require, and I think the difficult part is the blank percentages. It's just unknown. We just heard Director Laramundi say 0.4%, and I think we would want some time to digest that and study that to see how that would align. I think the difficult part of bills like this is because we're dealing with the unknown, we're the newcomer. We don't have a prior year, calendar year of wagering activity that we can base that 0.4 or whatever percentage you would apply to. So this bill is kind of tricky for us because we haven't turned on an OTB machine at all in the state of Wyoming. But Bally's will operate its first race starting in October. We're working diligently to get approvals for simulcasting facilities, but that's what makes this a giant question mark for us. So I just want to make that point. I think, our support or opposition to the bill would depend on what that percentage is. I was hoping the committee might have more robust information on what that would mean for the prior two operators. I saw that LSO put together an outstanding chart in your last legislation. I think it would be helpful for the committee to see, how have the purses grown between the other two or other three operators over the years. I think we heard some testimony that the increase was just 60% in 1 year. And that's a big increase because of HHR activity. So that makes me wonder why this would be necessary. So just a lot more questions. I do think it would be helpful if you were to select some percentage amounts, and so we could get a sense of what this bill would actually mean on the ground. But finally, I just want to make the point that we're also very concerned about how this would interact with the 100-mile rule. I think Senator Kolb was asking the prior speakers about their preference of how their money flows to their purses. We've had a lot of conversations in this committee about the 100-mile rule. The committee last year decided to leave it intact. We would ask again that that rule be left intact. But I think if you were a clever attorney and wanted to get this bill passed, you would say, look, the legislature took this action, this supersedes, this says that only operators can contribute only to their purses. So we would want, if the committee's willing to look at some language, a notwithstanding clause or something of that sort, that LSO would draft that says that these two concepts are separate and separate from one another, and that even if this were to pass, the 100-mile rule still is in place. So with that, Mr. Rushton talked about some of the negotiation that's happening. We're very excited about opening race day this fall, so we're happy to answer any questions, but we just have a lot of concerns and questions about what this bill would mean for their operations at this time.
Committee, any questions? Thank you, Mr. Rushton. Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Any further public comment? We'll go ahead and close public comment at this time. Committee, what's your pleasure on this legislation? Co-Chair Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would propose, we're up for amendments now, right? So I'd propose that we fill in the X blank percentage to 0.4% as a starting point. And we're going to have time for people to, fair enough, you didn't know what the numbers were. So we'll start with a number. People can come back with an opinion about that in our next meeting. But I would propose that as a starting point instead of having, obviously, X%.
I'd be happy to second that. Committee, any discussion? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a little bit of concern that we are micromanaging a private corporation, telling them what they can make on a race. I think, why are we even sticking our nose into this?
Co-Chair Cole.
Yeah, just to that point of view, number one, we're dealing with these are multi-billion-dollar industries. They're not, they're not a horseman's group, and quite frankly, and the thought was that we would put a floor. They can go more than that. They can negotiate what they want. Many states have floors to these agreements. We're not the first one to try to do it. It's a number. I think we can work with that 0.4 as a beginning point, but that was the reason. This is about, we do the same thing with contract between for physicians, say to nurses and those kind of things. We get involved with that also, protecting their rights as employees. And you could argue the same thing. So I think 0.4 is a good beginning point to this. We're going to give time for the people affected to kind of make a comment, to their opinion about this, and we can further discuss it and work the bill draft and see where it goes. So.
Further discussion? Might I just ask, the language that says not less than, which would be 0.4% with this amendment, that only gives the floor. Is that correct? That they could negotiate if they chose to for, say, 0.6%?
That's correct. It's currently drafted as a floor, and right now it's a floor that would apply to both parimutuel, historic, and live events. So we'd probably only have one X, clean up that language, just be the 0.4%. That would be a floor. You could, of course, add language to clarify that nothing in the subsection limits the amount that can be contributed to purses from any other source. I think right now that the way that horse racing purses work is that the operators can currently contribute, and I believe totaled For 307, it was about 2.4 million last year. For Wyoming Downs, 2.2 million, and Wyoming Horse Racing, 2 million. So about 6.5 million is what the Gaming Commission report showed, rounded, that the operators contributed. That doesn't mean that was all that was won at horse racing. For the horse racing purses that were won, there are other sources that are contributed and matching sources and other ways to add to the purses, but that's the operator portion. Where if you look at the 0.4 for the Breeders' Award, that's about 10 million right now that went in for 2025. So this 0.4% would be a little bit higher of a floor than is currently operating, but we can firm up those numbers and bring them all back with the committee's amendment to actually put it in as 0.4, and that would be the floor.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment to move the blank to a 0.4%, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
This does carry forward. Further amendments? Co-Chair Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I would go with Director Laramondi's recommendation to tie live event to simulcast permanent locations.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of tying it to the live event permitting, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Tied to the live event permitting does carry. We'll look for a clean draft for the next meeting on this bill. Are there further amendments? Sorry, I got ahead of myself. We'll look for a clean draft of this bill for the next meeting.
And one question for the committee, would you like to see draft language included that just makes this effective for when a permittee renews that they agree to this condition, or that it operates upon the expiration of existing contracts? Do you want to address that specifically in this bill, or see a staff comment with potential language?
Co-Chair Cole?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, if you would draft language that would address the existing contracts, so we wouldn't infringe on those rights until they get a new permit with the Gaming Commission, if I understood the way you explained it.
Yes, that's correct. That was one of the approaches I explained, that it would be upon the operators when they go to renew their permit to come into compliance and have being able to show that they would be in compliance when they get their new permit.
Yes, please include that language. Further comments on this bill? Thank you. We'll move on to the next piece of legislation, which is 27 LSO 0049, parimutuel wagering breakage.
This is working draft 0.4. The short title is parimutuel wagering breakage. The act similarly relates to parimutuel wagering, and you probably picked up these titles and statutes are very similar. They could be combined into one bill draft, of course, a simple policy decision if that was desired, or they could be kept separate as separate issues. This bill was requested at the last committee meeting in May. The committee directed that breakage that is held or retained by operators on parimutuel events be directed to the commissioner of the state, and to consider a different multiple or a floor on the amount of breakage that could be retained. So this bill draft works within the parimutuel statutes. It amends 1125-102. First, by creating a definition of breakage. Breakage is currently defined in the rules of the Gaming Commission, and this definition relies on that with a bit of wording changes to try to make it a little more readable for the layman or the statute. It would mean the odd cents from the amount payable remaining due to rounding on each dollar wagered, which is otherwise distributable in a parimutuel pool. That definition then is used in the new language on the bottom of page 2, as well as existing statute. This is that same distribution that we've been talking about statute where every Wednesday following any parimutuel event, whether simulcasting, historic horse racing, or live, the permittee does these reports and pays certain amounts. And for this one, it is to pay an amount equal to 1/4 of the total amount wagered for historic parimutuel events and 1.5 of the total amount wagered to live parimutuel events. And then also add in an amount equal to the breakage on historic and live parimutuel events that's collected under subsection C. So it's just specifying that they do collect that breakage and then they remit it the way that they remit the other tax. Subsection C is the section that deals with breakage. On page 3, it specifies that the permittee, currently they shall retain the breakage of not more than 10 cents. So it's a cap. They have to break on something that's 10 or under, and they get to retain it. They shall retain it. They have to retain it. This would amend that to say the permittee may collect the breakage on not more than 5 cents, which the permittee shall pay to the commission as specified under paragraph B2 of this section. Then separate it into 2 sentences so it didn't get to be too long there, where the permittee shall also retain unclaimed tickets not claimed within 1 year following the event. This breakage, if it is collected, nothing requires operator to collect breakage. They could not break on anything if their devices allow them and their systems allow them to do that. But if they collect breakage, it would be remitted to the commission and held in the parimutuel account. That's that separate account that's described on page 2. I will stand for questions on this or allow others to come up.
Committee, any questions? Co-Chair Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question, Tamara, along the same lines we just talked about the other contractual agreements somebody don't have. Let's just say the operators may have a software agreement that they're held to for X amount of years or whatever it may be. Could we put language in there that if they can't comply because of a software, an agreement that they'd have with the software that actually does this? Is that possible to put some exclusionary language in to not have this become effective until those contracts have expired?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I believe we could redraft it to, again, apply when the permittee goes to renew their license and ask for a new permit that they have in place, whatever is necessary to allow them to come into compliance with this, or when the contract expires. Now, if we base it on when the contract expires and having them come into compliance, there may be some issues that would need to be looked at further there, because then we would be treating different operators who were able to contract differently. They would have different rights and obligations under the law. So you can also, if you wanted to try to learn what the existing contracts are and try to draft the laws to not impair those contracts, if you find out that they usually expire in 5 years or 3 years or 2 years, we could try to draft the law to not, in practice, actually affect those contract rights. But of course, contract rights can be negotiated while we're legislating and working this through and before it becomes effective.
Follow up?
Yeah, just, I guess maybe a better question would be, we can just make it upon renewal of their simulcasting license that this would be applicable. And I suppose that'd be true anyway, wouldn't it? Because they have an existing simulcasting license.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and spelling that out, I think, is great to just cast aside any doubt about how the law is supposed to work, whether they're supposed to show compliance immediately, making effective upon renewal, just makes it clear for all parties that that's the deadline.
Further questions? Thank you. Director Laramendi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll go back just a little bit to Representative Johnson's question earlier. So the 11 cents in the analogy that you gave, the 11 cents that was sitting on the machine that can't be cashed out, that's not breakage. The breakage was already taken off the top. Now, I don't know the particular situation that you're talking about, but what I will tell you is this is what we see a lot. The operators will, it's not that they're protecting that 11 cents. It is that what they find or what they have a problem with is maybe the transient population will come onto the floor. They'll walk around to every machine, and anything that has, 5 or 10 cents, because a lot of people don't care. They just leave it and they walk away. They will just go press print, 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 and just collect all that. It's almost like panhandling in the electronic age. So that is what they're trying to avoid. That 11 cents that was remaining on the machine is not the breakage. It can be cashed out because the breakage comes off the top after you put the money in and play the game. When they divide up the money into the pools, the breakage comes off of those payouts on that. But the money that's left in the machine is not breakage. That's just, a lot of these operators are trying to eliminate folks from coming in and, like I said, essentially panhandling a machine. That's what that is. Madam Chair, if I may, on this bill, again, we don't see any real problems with this one. In fact, we see that this bill is kind of doing what the industry has been trying to do nationwide for the last 10, 20 years, is start to reduce the breakage amounts from a dime. A lot of jurisdictions have gone down all the way to a penny. So moving this down to a nickel is a step in the right direction. It's important to remember that breakage, realistically, breakage that is retained is actually the public's money. It's not the operator's money. It's not the commission's money. It's really not the state's money. It's those odd cents that the player who won, for example, if I won $1.09 and I break on a dime, I get paid $1 and that 9 cents is breakage. Currently now that goes back to the operators. With this bill, if I win $1.04, I get paid $1 and that 4 cents then goes to the pari-mutuel account that would be a part of our rollover. So every quarter, anything in excess of 1.5 million gets rolled over to the LISRA. This definitely, that player on the 10 cents, they just got 5 cents more back in their pocket. And then the state, I guess, for lack of a better word, gets that 4 cents. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions on this one as well.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Nick, I'm trying to understand this single cent or 11 or 10 cents left in the machine. Why can't we just clear out the machine after a player's done and have that amount go to, say, the Breeders' Cup? I mean, why can't the operators just clear that out and start at zero? Is that a possibility?
Madam Chair, Representative Johnson, so it is an option, and a lot of times they will do that. In fact, some of those odd cents ones you'll see in certain properties, they ask you if you just want to donate it. And they have a list of charities that you can donate that to, and then that money goes to charities. But if you look at the statutes, not in this one, but there's other statutes that talk about unclaimed tickets and what unclaimed tickets can be used for, kind of like the lottery. Our unclaimed tickets on this can be used to promote live racing. That's really what it is. Now, the ones that are left in a machine, we don't really classify those as unclaimed tickets. We classify those really as abandoned property. So what the operators, in fact, just recently have started to do is try to gather that up and then donate those to charities as abandoned property. So that is what we're trying to do. But if they don't catch them right away, people are in and out all the time. I do know that a lot of times their staff will, when they're making their way around the floor, if they see one that has, 5 or 6 cents, they'll hit the printout button so it's at zero for the next player.
So that
Follow up?
So then does establishment get that 11 cents or whatever's on there? I don't understand that. They pull the ticket out and it says there's 2 cents on that machine. Is that right? What happens to that money there?
Madam Chair, Representative Johnson. So currently that abandoned property, it kind of falls in their own personnel policies. What most of our operators, in fact, I think all of our operators are doing now is donating that to charity. So the employee is not just sticking it in their pocket as an extra little tip for themselves.
Or the operator.
Or the operator, no.
Further questions for the director? Co-chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Director, I guess I'll just ask your opinion about this, but once if this bill was to become law, I mean, I guess it would look like the breakage would go to zero. And if the breakage goes to zero, then it's really better off for the person playing. What's your thoughts about the future if this bill becomes law? I mean, what do you see happening? Is it going to be a benefit, like you explained, for the player, or more of a benefit than maybe it looks like on paper right now? That was my question.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I do see it as a benefit. It's a benefit to the wagering public, and it is going to limit the amount of actual breakage that is left. And you're right, a lot of cases. And it all depends on the vendor and the way that their software is designed. So currently, right now, one of our software developers that's out in the field, they have no breakage. There's none. The way that their machines are designed and their software is designed, it splits evenly, so there's never any breakage. Some of the other vendors are moving to models to reduce that to nickel or penny. I mean, I would recommend if you want to consider it, you could even move that down to a penny. I know the state of Kentucky just recently moved it to a penny, and then it almost eliminates it. And then that just is money that goes back to the wagering public. So yeah, I don't see any drawbacks of reducing that amount. I think it's good for the wagering public. It's their money to begin with.
Director, could you speak maybe what would the benefit be of using 1 penny over 5 cents?
Madam Chair, so if you broke on a penny, and I'd have to do the math, but so if you won $1 in one, you would get $1 and the operator would get a penny. If you won $1.06, you would get $1.05 and the operator would get a penny. It would be that one odd penny. But I can do the math, and I actually have it in my office. Then I can send you exactly how that break looks from penny, nickel, dime. And now that we don't create pennies anymore, so that might be helpful, but I can get that sent to you.
Thank you. Follow up, co-chair.
Yeah, just a question along those same lines. If I'm reading this right, or maybe I'm not, say it's a nickel break. Well, this says anything that's breakage goes to you, to the state. So you would get the nickel, or you would be able to expense that nickel instead of it being profit basically for the operators as current breakage situation is. Is that a correct way of saying what's currently going on as it applies to this bill?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, that is correct. Yes. So instead of the operator retaining that 5 cents, that would come to the parimutuel account with the commission, and it would be a part of our funding source.
Director, one question on page 3 where it says may, we strike shall retain and put in may collect. Having a may there instead of a shall collect, if we did it to the nickel, do you anticipate there being enforcement issues?
Madam Chair, no, I don't. I actually think that makes the enforcement side of it a little bit easier, because if they're not collecting it, for example, let's say that their software just doesn't break at all, then they're not collecting any breakage anyway. So with that may, there's no breakage to be had. I think the may language makes the compliance side of it and the enforcement side of it much easier.
Thank you. Representative Johnson.
So you kind of piqued my interest here. If they give you a nickel out of the breakage, right? It depends on where we are. That goes to you. Why couldn't we have that go to our problem gaming fund? I mean, what are you going to use that nickel for?
Madam Chair, Representative Johnson, you can put that money kind of wherever you choose to see it fit, really. The reality of it is, if it goes to the parimutuel account, it'll just become part of our quarterly rollover funds. So every quarter, anything in excess of $1.5 million in, I'll just call it our operational account, get transferred to the LISRA. So this would just realistically end up going to the LISRA, because we wouldn't use it as operational funds.
Further questions? Co-chair?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, realistically, Director, would you envision this nickel, let's just say it's a nickel, once the software vendors, the people that are employing or hiring the software vendors to write the software, wouldn't they just write it to break it 0? I mean, I think there won't be anything there, is my point. It may be a little bit in the beginning, even if you wanted to sweep it and use it for problem gaming. At the end of the day, it'll just evaporate, and to the benefit of the players, I might add.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I agree. That's exactly what'll happen. So this would, and I'd have to pull the numbers and see what we got kind of last year in breakage. I think one of our operators the entire year, it was like $130,000 for the calendar year. You cut that in half. Let's say they were breaking on a dime. If you cut that in half, you're talking $80,000. And then as things progress, Senator Kolb, you're exactly correct. These software developers are going to start reducing that down because, well, it just makes sense. And it is a benefit to the public. And the more the public plays, the better off everybody is.
Representative Johnson.
So your belief is that software development will eventually clear that down to zero and this problem would solve itself.
Madam Chair, Representative Johnson, I do. Because a lot of states are looking at this exact same thing and they've already reduced the breakage amount from dime down to nickel. And like I said, in the state of Kentucky, I think it's just this year, it goes now to a penny. We use the same software developers in Wyoming that the state of Kentucky uses for their HHR platforms. So their software engineers are already working on ways to reduce that down to pennies. And eventually it's going to go away. Like I said, we have a very reputable and popular vendor here now that has zero breakage on their machines. And it's definitely possible.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just thinking that maybe if we're going to go to zero, we don't even need to pass this bill. Just let it go to zero and we would save a little space on the green book.
Madam Chair, the problem with that is if this bill is not passed and it remains at 10 cents, it won't go to zero. It's the reduction of the ability for them to keep breakage on a dime that keeps the breakage in play. So the lower that breakage amount gets to, say, for example, if you made it a penny, I would venture to guess that in a very short time, breakage would completely disappear. 5 cents, it might take a little bit longer, but 10 cents, there would be no reason for that to go away currently because it's kind of a windfall.
Further questions? Thank you, Director. Any public comment on this bill about breakage? And is there anyone online, Ms. Vaughn?
I don't see anyone that's actively looking to testify online.
Thank you. One more call for public comment. Easy crowd today. We'll close public comment on this piece of legislation. Committee, do you have any amendments potential for this legislation?
Madam Chair, I would like to move the bill. I think it's pretty close to being ready, right, the way it is with a little, maybe one little amendment, but so I would move the bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of moving the bill, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The bill's been moved. Are there potential amendments to move the bill or to the bill that's been moved? Representative Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to move on page 3, line 8, change that 5 cents to 1 penny to 1.
Moved and seconded to move the nickel to a penny. Any discussion on the amendment? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That does move forward to be a penny. Further amendments to this legislation? Co-Chair Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to add the language we spoke about existing contracts appropriate with the LSO's blessing, that we would protect upon license renewal. I guess the similar language we put in the last bill to protect current contracts.
Moved by Kolb, seconded by Lean. Any discussion on the existing contracts? Amendment for this bill? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That is moved forward as well. Further amendments? Seeing none, is the committee ready to vote on the bill? All those in favor?
Is it roll call?
Will you clarify for me? Is it a roll call?
Yes, so what the committee is voting on is a recommendation to sponsor, or not to sponsor, a recommendation to send this bill to a committee, perhaps the management council like they did last year, but to accept it as amended and send it. And generally for legislation, we do ask for a roll call vote to ensure that we know that it has been
adopted by all members of the committee or that it's been adopted by the majority or whatever the committee's rules require, which for this committee is just a majority of the committee to move it on. So if you want to specify or decide at a later date where to recommend it go to, if you have several bills and you want to split them up, or if you want them to all go to the same committee, you can make that as part of the motion now. And then, yes, we will try to take a roll call vote.
We will recommend that this bill be, upon passage of the committee, go to Management Council. Is everyone clear on what they're voting on this piece of legislation? Breakage in two amendments that we conceptually would accept based on LSO's drafting. Ms. Vaughn, if you'll call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. On 27 LSO 0049, version 0.4 as amended. Senator Crago.
Aye.
Senator McEwen.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Webb.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Kolb.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Lean.
Aye.
You have 6 aye.
We'll look forward to presenting this to Management Council. Seeing that, we are up at the lunch hour. We made a lot of headway, have made up some time. Thank you so much. We'll be back here at 1:30. Thank you.
Good job.